Chapter 476. The news of Li Tianlan's awakening quickly spread throughout the office of the president. The atmosphere in the presidential palace was still heavy, but it was no longer oppressive. Tens of thousands of elite soldiers heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. When Li Tianlan was in a coma, the Snowdance Corps was not humiliated, but everyone felt extremely humiliated. In order to seek stability, the higher-ups of the Corps chose to stick to their positions, which also meant that they could not take the initiative to attack. They could only watch the dark forces show off in Reki City one after another. In order to test Li Tianlan's injury, some forces even sent masters to test the situation in person. The Snowdance Corps killed some of them. Although they were still ruthless, when they thought about it carefully, they always felt like they were being bullied at home. Now that Li Tianlan had woken up, the entire Snowdance Corps breathed a sigh of relief, and their morale rose again. Li Tianlan was not in a hurry to do anything. He just held a temporary meeting with high-level officials in the office of the president. In addition to the high-level officials of the Snowdance Corps in the office of the president, Prime Minister Riker of Wulan State, Dark Swordmaster Qin Shilai, Lin Yuxian, General Yi of 9 Heavens of Zhongzhou State, and Lieutenant General Li Wangxing of 9 regions were all invited. The meeting was called abruptly. However, the higher-ups arrived very quickly. Li Tianlan sat in the main seat of the conference room and watched the high-level members of the Snowdance Corps come in one by one. He felt calm inside and seemed more and more peaceful. Everyone was laughing. Li Tianlan's sobriety was something they had been looking forward to for a long time. What surprised them even more was that Li Tianlan's injury seemed to be recovering very well. But in Reki City, where people's hearts were gradually in turmoil, Li Tianlan's recovery from his injury meant too many things. The high-level members of the Snowdance Corps had no reason to be unhappy. "Young master, you look good." Li Wangxing took the initiative to speak with a smile. For Li Tianlan, he was absolutely one of his own. But for the Snowdance Corps, General Jiutian and Lieutenant General Jiuzhou were both guests. Therefore, they were the closest to Li Tianlan and it was convenient for them to talk. "I feel good after a nap." Li Tianlan nodded. "Your Highness, Deputy Marshal Lu Yun is on the phone with the Vice Marshal. He should be a little late." Li Zonghu came over and whispered in Li Tianlan's ear. Li Tianlan nodded casually. Watching Prime Minister Riker walk in, he said directly, "Almost everyone is here, so now." Bang! The door that Rick had just closed was violently pushed open from the outside. The door slammed against the wall with a loud and dull thud. Lu Yun walked in with a cold expression. Li Tianlan was stunned. Drifting Cloud didn't seem to expect that there would be so many people in the conference room. After a moment of silence, he managed to ease his expression and saluted Li Tianlan. "Take a seat." Li Tianlan asked, "What made you so angry?" Lu Yun's expression, which had barely calmed down, changed again, but he seemed to be suppressing his anger. He shook his head and said, "The call with the Vice Marshal just now wasn't pleasant." Li Tianlan motioned for Drifting Cloud to continue. Qin Qinghuan would definitely not stay in Im. Li Tianlan had expected this. As one of the core high-level members of the Beihai Corps, although they were enemies, Qin Qinghuan's leadership ability and personal force were outstanding if he put aside his standpoint. Otherwise, the Wang family of Beihai would not have transferred him to the Snowdance Corps and regarded him as the strongest force to check and balance him. Li Tianlan was also a little surprised. He had been unconscious for 10 days. 10 days was not long, but it was definitely not short either. During this time, Qin Qinghuan still stayed in Im and didn't take any action until today. For this alone, Li Tianlan felt that he should praise Vice Marshal Chen for his patience. Drifting Cloud looked even angrier. "Vice Marshal means that your Highness has been in a coma for a long time, and the Snowdance Corps needs someone to take charge of the overall situation. He will arrive in Reki City tonight to visit your injury and temporarily take charge of the overall situation of Reki City for you." His voice was so loud that it directly spread throughout the conference room. Li Wangxing and Yi remained calm. Lin Yuxian listened with a smile. But the faces of the other high-level members of the Snowdance Corps suddenly changed. Li Zonghu, who especially didn't like Qin Qinghuan, directly sneered and said, Take charge of the overall situation for your highness? Does he deserve it? What the hell? Did he turn a deaf ear to his highness's previous military order? Does he want to take charge of the overall situation? He may not be able to. Drifting Cloud's tone was a little mocking. But if you are transferred away, he can. Li Zhonghu was stunned and seemed to think that he had heard wrong. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and didn't speak for a long time. Chen Qinghuan was the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps. The vice-marshal was actually equivalent to the deputy marshal, but his ranking was ahead of the two deputy marshals, Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. If Li Tianlan couldn't give orders, Chen Qinghuan's position was indeed qualified for him to give orders on Li Tianlan's behalf. If all this could barely be regarded as a normal phenomenon, then the attempt to transfer Li Zhonghu away was a bit intriguing. Did he say that? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Yes, he said that Commander Li Zhonghu should rest for a while and suggested that he be transferred back to Imta Garrison. He will temporarily take over everything in Reki City on behalf of your highness, Drifting Cloud said calmly. Lu Yun said calmly. His expression was furious, but his eyes were abnormally clear. Li Tianlan laughed and looked extremely happy. If Chen Qinghuan disregarded the military order during his coma and temporarily replaced Li Tianlan to take charge of the overall situation, then transferring Li Zhonghu away completely showed his ambition. If Li Zhonghu was forcibly transferred away, more than 10,000 elites of the Thunderbolt Battalion must leave with Li Zhonghu. Although there were only 5,000 people under Chen Qinghuan's command, they were also elites of the Beihai Corps and the Shadow Sting Army. Their combat capability was not much lower than that of the Thunderbolt Battalion, and they could also control the situation here. If Li Zhonghu took away the direct troops, everything in Reki City today, even Li Tianlan's own life, would fall into the hands of Chen Qinghuan and the Wang family of Beihai. If he didn't take the troops with him and went to Im alone, when necessary, the more than 10,000 Thunderbolt Battalion soldiers would definitely be abandoned in conflicts and slowly consumed. At that time, even if Li Tianlan woke up, without the direct troops, it would be useless to hold the hat of a marshal. As for Li Zhonghu's disobedience to orders, that was probably what Chen Qinghuan wanted to see the most. The Special Warfare Battalion was often stricter than the army headquarters, and its authority was freer. In sensitive times, the military orders of the Special Warfare Battalion were above everything else. If Li Zhonghu dared to disobey them, Chen Qinghuan would dare to execute him for treason. As long as Li Zhonghu was squeezed out, it didn't matter if more than 10,000 Thunderbolt Battalion soldiers left or not. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud used to be assassins. Now they were still inexperienced and could not defeat Chen Qinghuan. Chen Qinghuan, who had an absolute advantage in Im, could cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai in the name of the Snowdance Corps. It might not be long before the whole Reki City would hang the flag of the Snowdance Corps. As for Prime Minister Rieker, it was impossible for him to change his position, but what could it change? The terrorist Jiang Qiansong could kill Carlos. Was Prime Minister Rieker 100% safe? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, and his smile grew bigger and bigger. He had to admit that Chen Qinghuan had found a good opportunity. There was nothing wrong with him except that he was shameless. But the premise was that if the plan was to be implemented smoothly, Li Tianlan's injury must be so serious that he would be in a coma for a long time. Li Tianlan was awake now. Chen Qinghuan's action was still a step too slow. He still doesn't know that I woke up? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Drifting Cloud hesitated for a moment, nodded, and said, "The news that your highness woke up was very sudden. Before I had time to tell the vice-marshal had hung up the phone. When I called, the other party had already turned off his phone." Li Tianlan laughed again. The others also laughed, and their smiles were meaningful. "It seems that our vice-marshal is in a hurry," Cool Breeze said with a smile, and there was some playfulness in his eyes. "Ignore him," Li Tianlan said calmly. "Let's wait for him." He suddenly turned his head to look at Prime Minister Rieker and asked, "How is the collection of the bodies of the victims of the Snowdance Corps?" Everyone was stunned for a moment. No one expected that Li Tianlan would first mention this matter. In the chaotic situation outside, he first cared about the bodies of the martyrs of his own corps. Such a thought was not right or wrong, but such a gesture was undoubtedly worthy of respect. Rieker hesitated a little and said softly, "Olga and the Prime Minister of Ross State both spoke to me on the phone. The Snowdance Corps has sacrificed a lot of people. They hope that Your Highness can give them some more time." Rieker said this helplessly. Everyone knew that the Snowdance Corps had marched all the way, and the place where the war broke out was the border between Olga State and Wulan State. After that, all the wars were carried out in Wulan State. The land of Olga State and Ross State had never been burned with the flames of war at all. But now, Li Tianlan asked these two countries for the bodies of the martyrs. Rieker shook his head, full of bitterness. "I don't have time for them. At this time tomorrow, all the bodies must be sent to Wulan State. I will personally hold a farewell meeting in the Hero Square. This is the last chance for Olga State and Ross State. I can't see the bodies, and then they will see the actions of the Snowdance Corps." Li Tianlan said in a cold tone. If one person was missing, one town would be destroyed. If one team was missing, one city would be destroyed. This was what Li Tianlan had said at the beginning. For small countries like Olga State and Ross State, such a threat was absolutely powerful. The most important thing was that there were no bodies at all in Olga State and Ross State. Whether the final result was one person less or one city less, it was all up to Li Tianlan. Rieker sighed slightly. Even though his current position was exactly the same as Li Tianlan's, under such circumstances, he still felt that His Highness was too overbearing. In addition, is His Majesty the Sword Emperor still in Reki City? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Yes. Drifting Cloud replied with a smile. Li Tianlan nodded and said, "Well, invite His Majesty the Sword Emperor to the farewell meeting of the Snowdance Corps." After saying this, he thought for a moment and then shook his head. "Maybe it's not necessary. I think we'll see him tonight at the latest." "I'll invite him in person then." Climbs. Chapter 477. The conference room was silent for a moment. Li Tianlan said that he might see Wang Tianzong tonight. Everyone knew the meaning of this sentence. In this era, the name Wang Tianzong brought almost suffocating pressure to everyone. No one wanted to be Wang Tianzong's enemy. However, this was the general trend. There was no other choice. Li Tianlan unconsciously tapped the table with his fingers and remained silent for a long time. Until a voice rang out. "Your Highness, what about the other forces?" The one who spoke was Sun Mengran, the deputy commander of the Thunderbolt Division. He was at the same level as Li Zhonghu in the Border Control Corps. He kept a low profile in the Snowdance Corps and worked as Li Zhonghu's deputy peacefully. He was a man of few words, but as soon as he spoke, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. "Other forces." Li Tianlan repeated it, not a question. Heroes Club, Shadow Throne, Men in Black, Dark Knights, Vatican, Fantasy World. Sun Mengran said, "These are the biggest forces. In addition, there is information that the Morton family and the Violet family are also ready to make trouble. As for the forces that have secretly sneaked into Reki City, there are countless. Recently, we have been very low-key in Reki City, but the activities of the major forces are very frequent." Li Tianlan nodded and suddenly looked at President Rieker. "Are the higher-ups stable?" Rick thought about it seriously for a while. This question was very serious. If he didn't answer it well, it would lead to serious consequences. Rick went through all the higher-ups in his mind and said, "There won't be any problems for the time being." Now, except for Prime Minister Rieker, who clearly stood by Li Tianlan's side, the attitudes of the senior officials of Wulan State were relatively subtle. They might not be 100% loyal to Zhongzhou State, but they would not be drawn over by other forces in a short time. Now that Li Tianlan had woken up, the possibility was even lower. However, whether the senior officials of Wulan State would change their stance or not depended on what Li Tianlan would do after he woke up. For now, yes, for now, Li Tianlan nodded. That is to say, after a long time, the higher-ups will be unstable? If that's the case, then... There was a sudden knock on the door. Dongqing Rushi walked into the conference room with sleepy eyes. She rubbed her eyes, held the phone in her hand, and said softly, "Phone." She walked up to Li Tianlan. In public, her address was also very formal. Minister Dongqing's. Li Tianlan's heart moved slightly. He took the phone, stood up, and walked to the door of the conference room. When he was about to go out, he suddenly looked back at Xianxia and asked, "What did the Qin clan say?" "We will do our best to stop the power of Morton and the Violet family." Xianxia responded calmly. This was undoubtedly a very difficult task. Both the Violet and Morton families had invincible realm experts, and their resources were by no means comparable to the weakest Rekvia. If the two families practiced and entered Reki City, it would be difficult for the Qin clan to resist them alone. But in the current situation, only the Qin clan was responsible for stopping the Violet and Morton families. Li Tianlan thought for a moment and glanced at the conference room. Tostel, the second in command of Wulan State and the new patriarch of Rekvia, was not in the conference room. "Contact the Rekvia family," Li Tianlan said. Xianxia nodded, but he did not look relaxed at all. This was what many people wanted to say but had never said. With Li Tianlan taking over Wulan State and Rekvia, the position of Tostel, the new patriarch of the Rekvia family, could be said to be very firm. But the change of the highest power of Rekvia was not logical. After the death of Patriarch Schenker, the entire Rekvia family was in turmoil. Tostel's move only took the lead, but it might not be able to really bear the burden. Now, with all the major forces entering Reki City, as the former dominator of Wulan State, the Rekvia family was naturally the target of all forces. Tostel's position remained unchanged, but no one was sure what other real power figures of the Rekvia family thought now. It was impossible for Li Tianlan not to know this. But he still wanted to pull the Rekvia family to the side of the Qin clan, which showed that his mind was still very clear. To resist foreign aggression, one must first settle the internal affairs. Li Tianlan's move seemed to indicate that he was going to attack the Rekvia family. The strength of a cleaned-up Rekvia might be greatly reduced, but the foundation of the four major families in Eastern Europe was here. If Rekvia fully cooperated with the Qin clan, it would be easier for the Qin clan to face the Violet family and the Morton family. In addition, make an appointment for me with the Holy Virgin of the Vatican, Angel, and Arcis. Li Tianlan continued. "Leave this matter to me," Cool Breeze said. Li Tianlan glanced at him and suddenly remembered the rumor between Tribulation and Angel. He nodded thoughtfully and continued, "Finally, in the name of the Snowdance Corps, send a notice to all the major forces. I don't care whether they are the Heroes Club or the Men in Black. 1 week, I will give them 1 week. All the forces must get out of Reki City within 1 week. Otherwise, I don't mind taking the Snowdance Corps to have a heart-to-heart talk with them." The atmosphere in the conference room exploded. Li Zhonghu laughed and beamed with joy. Even Prime Minister Riker's face was flushed with excitement. Let all the dark forces get out of Reki City within a week. How was this a notice? It was completely the last warning. It was indeed a good thing to follow such a marshal. Li Tianlan was still calm. There was no disturbance in his heart. In his opinion, Reki City was already his territory, and all the major forces were not his welcome guests, so it was a matter of course to let them get out. He turned around, walked out of the conference room, and went straight to the study of the office of the president. No one had used the study since Carlos' death, but it was very clean. Li Tianlan turned on the screen of the study, connected the mobile phone, and sent a video to Dongqing Wudi. Dongqing Wudi had been waiting for Li Tianlan's call. As soon as Li Tianlan's video was dialed, the smiling face of the former god of massacre of Zhongzhou State appeared in front of Li Tianlan. "Marshal." Li Tianlan raised his hand and saluted solemnly. "This child, why are you so polite?" Dongqing Wudi narrowed his eyes and smiled. Looking at Li Tianlan, who was full of energy, his smile was happy and satisfied. "How is your injury?" "It's almost healed. It doesn't affect my combat effectiveness." Li Tianlan told the truth. Now there was still a short distance for his injury to be completely healed. But in the case that one wind and thunder vein was half useless, his speed, strength, and sword intent could barely be compatible. In other words, if Li Tianlan did not pursue the ultimate perfection when he recovered from his injury, He could give up this wind and thunder vein and break through to the invincible realm with a single wind and thunder vein. In this state, Li Tianlan's potential might decline, but his actual combat effectiveness was slightly stronger than before he was injured. That's good. Dongqing Wudi nodded. He looked at Li Tianlan, who was calm and composed in a military uniform in the video. His eyes were a little dazed, and he seemed to think of something. You handled the matter of Wulan's state very well. It couldn't be more perfect. Dongqing Wudi's voice grew softer, and there was undisguised appreciation in his words. Have you talked to Riker? Li Tianlan nodded and asked. Before he fell into a coma, he asked for compensation from Wulan's state and an apology from Riker. All these requests were actually nothing. What really mattered was the negotiation between Zhongzhou state and Wulan state. Compared with his requests, from the standpoint of Wulan state, Riker's negotiation with Zhongzhou state was a real surrender and humiliation of the country. These 4 words could also show the benefits that Zhongzhou state was about to get. Although Li Tianlan could represent Zhongzhou state, he was not good at this kind of negotiation. Prime Minister Riker killed Carlos, and Rekvia walked into the arms of Zhongzhou state. In this case, the bottom line of Wulan state had been so low that there was no bottom line. He naturally threw the problem of how to maximize the benefits of Wulan state to the top of Zhongzhou state. It had been 10 days since he fell into a coma. At this time, the negotiation between Zhongzhou state and Wulan state should have been settled. Yes. Dongqing Wudi's smile grew wider. Riker has agreed to share all the resources of Wulan state with Zhongzhou state, as well as to provide permanent garrison bases and trillions of Zhongzhou dollars in reparations. In addition, Wulan state's political position has also made major adjustments. From then on, it has begun to tilt toward Zhongzhou state. The treaty will be signed soon. After the treaty is signed, citizens of Zhongzhou state do not need to apply for immigration to Wulan state, and the people between the 2 countries can marry freely. His smile was a little weird. There are so many beautiful women in Wulan state. Boy, you've created benefits for those single guys in the Border Control Corps. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and wanted to laugh, but he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Not to mention other conditions, just the first one was scary enough. Sharing all the resources of Wulan state with Zhongzhou state. And it was unconditional sharing. Wulan state was a resource-rich country. It had a land area second only to Snow Country in the whole of Europe and equivalent to that of France. It was rich in more than beautiful women. This fertile land was almost full of resources, oil, natural gas, a lot of minerals, metals, and the most important food. What did it mean to share all these with Zhongzhou state? If the 2 countries married freely, 100 years later, who could be sure that the people walking in the streets and alleys of Wulan state were from Zhongzhou state or Wulan state? Do you understand? Dongqing Wudi asked with a smile. Li Tianlan nodded silently. For a moment, he didn't know how to express his feelings. Wulan state has always been a sore point of Zhongzhou state. This time you solved the problem of Wulan state, and we got back all the investment in Wulan state at one time. Now the whole Wulan state is related to the development of Zhongzhou state in the next 100 years. All this situation is thanks to you. Tianlan, this is a real great contribution. On behalf of Zhongzhou state, I want to thank you and the Li family. Dongqing Wudi's expression gradually became serious. He stood up and gave Li Tianlan a military salute with a solemn expression. Li Tianlan shook his head with a wry smile and returned the salute. After a moment of silence, he asked, "When will the treaty be signed?" "The time is set for a week later. You must attend at that time. In Zhongzhou state, President Li Huaqing will personally go to Wulan state to sign a treaty with Prime Minister Riker. At that time, you must protect the safety of Mr. President." Dongqing Wudi said slowly. Li Tianlan nodded and said, Dongqing Wudi sat down, lit a cigarette, and said calmly, "In addition, there is a large delegation following the president. I'll send you the list later. There are many people. You can get in touch with them. Rushi also knows them. She will introduce them to you at that time." Li Tianlan froze and carefully looked at Dongqing Wudi's expression. The screen in front of him was very clear. Across the screen, across thousands of mountains and rivers, Li Tianlan vaguely saw the faint exhaustion and joy in Dongqing Wudi's eyes. General? At this moment, Li Tianlan really had 1,000 words in his heart, but he could not express them. Even a fool could understand the meaning of Dongqing Wudi's words. Wulan State was the country that Li Tianlan and the Snowdance Corps had conquered. Li Tianlan was the candidate strongly supported by the giant group. The most elite troops under Dongqing Wudi's command were all left to Li Tianlan, except for the part that had to be traded out because of the general trend. This time, when Li Tianlan entered Eastern Europe, the giant group took unprecedented risks and invested unprecedented amounts. Now Li Tianlan had conquered Wulan State. When it was time to share the fruits of victory, most of such a large piece of cake would naturally belong to the giant group. This was Li Tianlan's Wulan State, Zhongzhou State, and also Wulan State of the giant group. This was the naked interest. That was why Wang Tianzong, the Sword Emperor, could not let go of Wulan State. In the current situation, whoever occupied Wulan State had the qualification to divide the interests of Wulan State. Li Tianlan was already supreme in Wulan State. The giant group naturally became the biggest winner. Other groups might also want to get involved, but to put it bluntly, they were not qualified. Even if they forced themselves to participate, Li Tianlan was still here, and the interests were in his hands. He could give it to whoever he wanted. So Li Tianlan could imagine the position of the delegation that followed Li Huaqing to Wulan State. Not everyone in the delegation might belong to the giant group. But most people must belong to the giant group. This was the most basic rule. Li Tianlan was in Wulan State. This was a feast that Li Tianlan fought for the giant group. This was his reward for the giant group and the Dongqing clan. But Dongqing Wudi now wanted to give this list to Li Tianlan, and even asked Li Tianlan to have more contact with these people with Dongqing Rushi's company. The meaning of this sentence was very obscure. But it was also very clear. This was going to take over? Replace Dongqing Wudi to take over the entire giant group? Li Tianlan had mixed feelings. If all this went well, when the chaos in Eastern Europe ended and he returned to Zhongzhou State, he would become the most powerful person in Zhongzhou State, whether he was the marshal of the Snowdance Corps or not. What was his identity as one of the helmsmen of the 6 groups in Zhongzhou State? Marshal? I don't seem to be mentally prepared for this. Li Tianlan was silent for a long time before he said dryly, "It doesn't matter." Dongqing Wudi laughed. Whether internally or externally, from the dark world to the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State, Dongqing Wudi, the marshal of Zhongzhou State, left everyone with the impression that he was calm, dignified, energetic, decisive, and tough. This was the impression of Dongqing Wudi in everyone's mind. But now, with his smile, Li Tianlan clearly felt the old age and warmth under Dongqing Wudi's smile. Tianlan, this is a very good opportunity. If Eastern Europe is a cake, you are the cake master. If everyone wants to eat the cake, they must look at your face. When they ask you for help, it is undoubtedly the best time to get in touch with them. You will take charge of the giant group in the future, and now is the best opportunity to integrate. And you have to do more than just integrate. You have to be a leader. You have to make them feel that you are their leader when you enter the giant group. Don't worry, the giant group is very big and loose. This time, those who follow the president to Wulan State can be said to be the direct descendants of our 3 families. If they recognize me, they will recognize you. You may not be ready to take over my position now, but it's time to leave an impression on them. I will help him. Dongqing Rushi's voice sounded clean and clear. Dongqing Wudi looked at Dongqing Rushi and then at Li Tianlan. Finally, he couldn't help laughing. His laughter was gratified and hearty, like a spring rain in Li Tianlan's heart, moistening things silently. I'll send you the list right away. Dongqing Wudi said with a smile. Tianlan, you don't have to be so polite, and don't say thank you. I don't like it. We all think highly of you and Rushi. Treat her well. When you need it, she will help you. Li Tianlan nodded with a complicated heart. He had long thought about the arrival of this day. He had thought about it during the final maneuver of the Sky Academy. But he had never thought that this day would come so soon. Dongqing Wudi couldn't wait to send the giant group to him, give him power and status, and let him rise. If all these were Dongqing Rushi's dowry, then the dowry was too rich. And Dongqing Wudi said, "We." Obviously, this "we" did not refer to the elders of the Dongqing clan. It was the three pillar families of the giant group: Dongqing, the Zhou family, and the Bai family. Although the three families were very close, Li Tianlan couldn't figure out why the Dongqing clan recognized him, and the other two families also recognized him. So when the Dongqing clan wanted to send the giant group to him, he didn't even hear any objection from the two families. Was the giant group really so generous? The call, which was destined to have a far-reaching impact, ended in silence. In the office of the army headquarters, Dongqing Wudi put out the cigarette but in his hand, still with a smile on his face. "Are you going to let Tianlan take over?" General Bai Qingzhao, the Deputy Secretary General of the Army Headquarters, asked softly. There was no objection in his tone, but a little hesitant. "Is it too urgent?" "No hurry." Dongqing Wudi shook his head. "This is the best opportunity." "The opportunity is good, but aren't you afraid of stimulating Wang Tianzong and Gu Xingyun by doing this? Even the prince group can't sit still, right?" Bai Qingzhao said. Dongqing Wudi was silent for a while and shook his head. "It doesn't matter," he said slowly. "Even if I don't stimulate them, they will still do what they want to do. These so-called stimuli won't affect any of their decisions at all. And, no matter what, Tianlan will win." Bai Qingzhao lowered his head and took a drag on his cigarette. His voice was a little vague. Dongqing Wudi was silent for a while and said blandly, "If there is really an accident, I will resign from the position of the Minister of the Army Headquarters." Bai Qingzhao was stunned for a while, then shook his head with a wry smile. "You think too simply. How can it be so simple? It's not necessarily difficult. The point is that I never thought about this what if." Dongqing Wudi looked at his brother-in-law and said calmly, "Don't worry, it will be fine." It was not until Dongqing Rushi pulled Li Tianlan's palm that he suddenly reacted. The video call in front of him had already been hung up. Dongqing Rushi stood beside him, gazed into his eyes, and said softly, "Are you unhappy?" "How can I be unhappy?" Li Tianlan reached out and pinched Dongqing Rushi's delicate little nose. "I just can't wrap my head around it for a while. It's hard for me to describe my current mood. In short, it's very complicated." "It's okay." Dongqing Rushi held Li Tianlan's palm. "I will help you." Li Tianlan smiled. When he was about to speak, the door of the study was suddenly knocked on. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and said, "Come in." The door was pushed open. Prime Minister Riker, who looked calm, came in and said respectfully, "Your Highness." Li Tianlan nodded and said in surprise, "What's the matter?" "Carlos's wife and daughter are dead," Riker reported softly. Li Tianlan froze in place. After a while, he said, There was a fire in their temporary residence. After investigation, it was found to be an accident." Riker's tone was a little erratic. Li Tianlan said, "Oh." His tone was also a little erratic. Carlos's family had been living in the office of the president before. After Carlos's death, they all moved out. It had only been a few days. "Take care of him," Li Tianlan said halfway and suddenly found that he could not go on. He narrowed his eyes, looked at Riker, whose face was stiff, and did not speak for a long time. Riker continued to say in that flat voice, "Your Highness, Carlos has no family. He has a younger brother who does business in Wulan State. A week ago, we found that he was suspected of serious tax evasion. In the process of summoning him, his bodyguard resisted with a gun. Then he tried to flee to England with his family. The family of 3 was shot dead on the spot. Carlos's mother couldn't stand the blow. She had a heart attack and died 5 days ago. Today is the funeral of Carlos's mother. After the funeral, Carlos's wife and daughter also had an accident." His voice was calm, as if he was giving a work report. But Li Tianlan's face gradually became pale. He did not feel that he was soft-hearted. But after the tragic game, the result of the victory and defeat was so clearly and cruelly presented in front of him for the first time, and the impact on him was extremely fierce. His younger brother's family of 3, his wife and daughter, and his mother, with the death of Carlos, All of this was completely torn apart by the world. It was cruel and cold without any warmth. Li Tianlan suddenly felt a little scared, because he thought of himself. He could be sure that if he failed in Eastern Europe and died in Reki City or anywhere else in Eastern Europe, then everyone in the Li family and the Dongqing clan would end up even more miserable than Carlos's family. Dongqing Wudi and Dongqing Rushi were among them. By Qingqian and all the others. The mountain was high and the road was dangerous. People who stood at a high place often carried too much on their backs. So Li Tianlan could not lose. He stood beside Dongqing Rushi, and his body was trembling slightly. But he looked at Riker with a pale face and a poker face. Riker lowered his head, lower and lower. After a long time, Li Tianlan nodded and said with a poker face, "Got it. You can go out." Riker bowed deeply to Li Tianlan and turned to leave. When he walked to the door, Li Tianlan suddenly said, "Wait." Riker turned around and looked at Li Tianlan in confusion. Then he heard Li Tianlan's question. "How many troops can you mobilize in Reki City?" Chapter 478. Was not far from Reki City. The distance of a few hundred kilometers was only a few hours of driving at full speed. Therefore, Qin Qinghuan, the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps, came very quickly. When he drove the military off-road vehicle of the Arctic Ocean Command at full speed and entered Reki City, he did not know what would happen next. The ignorant are fearless. Qin Qinghuan was not only ignorant but also ambitious. Qin Qinghuan's military career began in the Beihai province, and he had advanced step by step within the Beihai Corps. The Wang family of Beihai could be said to be the strongest superpower in the entire Dark World. This is a matter of public acceptance. It was recognized for many reasons. For example, Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong was the best in the world. The Wang family of Beihai had a strong foundation. The kendo of the Wang family of Beihai almost represented the peak of the Dark World. And the Wang family of Beihai occupied Beihai province but controlled a supergroup that could influence Zhongzhou state. These are all reasons. But the most important reason was that the Wang family of Beihai owned Beihai province and the Beihai Corps. The North Sea province was surnamed Wang. This was the case both on the surface and in reality. The Beihai Corps was the strongest force in the Wang family of Beihai that could look down on the entire Dark World. The Demonic Legion was very mysterious, and the Heaven Punishing Squad was very powerful, but all of them were inferior to the North Sea Legion. Because of the number of people. The entire Beihai Corps had 350,000 soldiers, including the sea, land, and air forces, and was equipped with the world's most advanced weapons and armaments. In times of need, a military order from Mount Dibing could even gather millions of troops within a week and be equipped with the most complete weapons and equipment. What did this mean? This was a destructive force that could tear anything apart. Among all the super dark forces in the world, only the Wang family of Beihai had hundreds of thousands of the most elite troops on the surface. It was placed in the open. Only on the surface. This kind of power was so powerful that it was no exaggeration to say that even if Wang Tianzong died in Eastern Europe, the Wang family of Beihai would not fall as long as the Beihai Corps did not fall. There were many experts in the Beihai Corps, which was the real power that made Mount Dibing as stable as Mount Tai. It was exactly because of this that Qin Qinghuan was having a very difficult time in the North Sea Legion. He already held quite a high position in the North Sea Legion, but many people were wary of him due to his stance, and some of them didn't even dare to open up to him, because he was Wang Qinglei's confidant. The Wang Consortium was huge. There were many internal branches. Each branch had its own position in Beihai and even in Mount Dibing. However, Wang Tianzong had always held the most important North Sea Corps tightly in his hands. More than 80% of the middle and senior officers of the Beihai Corps only had eyes for Wang Tianzong. Under such circumstances, it was naturally quite difficult for Wang Qinglei's trusted aide, Qin Qinghuan, to survive in the North Sea Legion. Wang Qinglei's status had become more and more important in recent years. The divergence between him and Wang Tianzong gradually became obvious. But before everything was made public, no one said anything on the surface. Wang Tianzong had never expressed any opinion about Qin Qinghuan being in the Beihai Corps. It was only when the chaos in Eastern Europe happened that Wang Tianzong found an opportunity to transfer him out of the Beihai Corps and into the Snowdance Corps, the vice-marshal of the largest special warfare battalion in Zhongzhou State. A position with infinite possibilities. Chen Qinghuan was overjoyed, and Wang Qingle also acquiesced to this arrangement. After this transfer was successful, Chen Qinghuan's position in the North Sea Legion was naturally taken over by Wang Tianzong's confidant, and Wang Qingle didn't say anything either. So in this transfer, the two giants of the Wang family of Beihai reached a silent agreement. Both Wang Tianzong and Wang Qingle hoped that Chen Qinghuan would make Li Tianlan a mere figurehead in the Snowdance Corps and take control of this special warfare battalion. Chen Qinghuan was placed high hopes on him. While he was under great pressure, he was constantly looking for opportunities. Li Tianlan's serious injury and coma were the best opportunity for him. But at the beginning, he could still sit still and observe the situation calmly in Im. But as the rumors in the outside world gradually rose, Chen Qinghuan's ambition began to expand. All of Eastern Europe was spreading that Li Tianlan's injury was too serious and his foundation was completely lost. There were even rumors that Li Tianlan had died. Chen Qinghuan's own strength was only half a step away from the half-step invincible realm. He didn't believe that Li Tianlan's foundation would be completely destroyed. However, he would not be optimistic about Li Tianlan's injury. He had not officially entered the invincible realm, but he killed 2 invincible realm experts in a day. How could such a serious injury be cured so easily? Chen Qinghuan conservatively estimated that Li Tianlan would need at least half a year to recuperate to restore a certain degree of combat capability. And there were more and more rumors in the outside world. Li Tianlan was still in a coma. This further proved Chen Qinghuan's guess. He waited patiently for 10 days. Just when his patience was running out, he finally couldn't help but directly dial the phone of Drifting Cloud, the deputy commander of the Snowdance Corps. If the morale of the army was unstable, everything would not go smoothly. The commander was seriously injured and in a coma, and the deputy commander temporarily took control of the overall situation. This reason was absolutely logical. No one could stop him from going to Reki City. His strength in the Snowdance Corps was weak, and only about 5,000 people obeyed his command, which gave him a headache. Even if he forcibly drove Li Zhonghu out of Reki City with a military order after taking control of the situation, the 5,000 people who belonged to him were still a little empty in Reki City. So he needed Wang Tianzong's strong support. This was also the key reason why Chen Qinghuan couldn't wait to come to Im. The 5,000 elites of Im were ready to go. Chen Qinghuan rushed to the Caesar Hotel in Reki City almost without hesitation. It was still raining in Eastern Europe, messy and cold. Chen Qinghuan, who was travel-worn, felt something was wrong as soon as he walked into the hall. The hall of the Caesar Hotel was very luxurious, but the magnificent space was a little cold and quiet. In the rest area, some seemingly unrelated Caucasians were sitting on the sofa and chatting in a low voice. The moment Chen Qinghuan came in, almost everyone's eyes stayed on him quietly for a moment. A very subtle feeling emerged in Chen Qinghuan's heart. It was like a feeling of being surrounded. "I'm sorry, sir, the hotel is full. I suggest you," the extremely hot and seductive receptionist spoke with a smile. But before she finished speaking, Chen Qinghuan had interrupted her. "I'm not staying in the hotel. I'm looking for someone." The smile of the receptionist at the front desk faded a little, and she looked at Chen Qinghuan with some confusion. "I'm looking for someone who lives in 20, Vice Marshal Chen?" A voice suddenly sounded behind Chen Qinghuan. Chen Qinghuan turned around in confusion and saw a middle-aged woman in the uniform of the lobby manager coming over. Chen Qinghuan felt that she was a little familiar, but he forgot where he had seen her. The middle-aged but still dignified and elegant woman took the initiative to reach out her hand and said with a smile, "Let me introduce myself. I'm Poppy from the Shadow Throne. Now I'm the manager of the Caesar Hotel." Poppy. Chen Qinghuan suddenly remembered and knew the origin of the other party. At this time, looking at the white men and women in the hall, he suddenly realized something. Has this place been occupied by the Shadow Throne? Chen Qinghuan laughed. The queen doesn't like to have too many strangers around her, so she temporarily cleared the place. Now this is the place where the shadow throne is stationed. Poppy shook Xianxia's hand and said, "The queen already knows your intention, but you may have to wait a little. Now His Majesty the Sword Emperor is entertaining an important guest and may not have time to see you for the time being." Xianxia frowned and looked out of the hotel. The street outside the hotel was lit up. The sky gradually darkened, and the wind and rain continued. "But I also have something very important to see His Majesty," Xianxia said. "Trust me," Poppy said softly. "The guest His Majesty is entertaining is more important than anything else. Besides, it won't take long. Come with me." For Wang Tianzong, the most important person for him at this stage was the person who could break the deadlock in Eastern Europe. And at this moment, in front of him was the person who had the ability to break the deadlock. The lights in the luxurious hotel suite were warm and bright. Wang Tianzong, dressed in a casual suit, sat on the sofa and looked at the opposite side quietly. Opposite him sat a very tall and burly tramp. The tramp's body was majestic and very dirty at the same time. His clothes seemed to have not been washed for a long time. After being drenched by the rain, they had a very strange smell. There was a tea table between him and Wang Tianzong. The tea table was full of food. Fresh and tender steak, good foie gras, caviar, salad, bread slices. Wang Tianzong was looking at the tramp. The tramp was almost lying on the tea table. All the food on the coffee table was swept away like a whirlwind. The second dining cart was pushed up. The food was served and disappeared like running water. Wang Tianzong quietly watched the tramp wolf down the food with a curious look, as if he was looking at some interesting scenery. "Are you very strange?" the tramp suddenly said vaguely. He did not look up, and his tone was very casual. But between the lines, there was an extremely naked indifference and majesty. "If you were me, wouldn't you feel strange? Tyrant, who ranked 7th on the divine list, should have such a day. Who could have thought of it without seeing this scene with their own eyes?" The one opposite Wang Tianzong was Tyrant. Wang Tianzong spent the whole afternoon thinking about samsara and Qin Weibai. He knew that some speculations might be ridiculous. But the more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was the most likely. Just when he really couldn't help but let the Shadow Throne break the game first, Xian Ming finally brought the news of Tyrant. Wang Tianzong's luck had always been good. It was the same this time. With the clear news, Xian Ming acted quickly. In less than 2 hours, Tyrant was invited to the Caesar Hotel, in Wang Tianzong's room. Tyrant seemed to snort coldly, but he did not speak. He just concentrated on the food in front of him. "How did you end up like this? With your skills, if you didn't die, you shouldn't be so embarrassed." "What do you know?" Tyrant clenched his fist and slammed it on the tea table. The tea table did not move. But the whole hotel seemed to shake. Wang Tianzong said yes and raised his voice. Tyrant gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. "In the battle with the master of Samsara Palace that day, I was seriously injured. Although I barely escaped, the Samsara Palace has never stopped chasing me. If I hadn't experienced it myself, I wouldn't have believed that the Samsara Palace has such a terrifying power in Eastern Europe. And they have something to do with the Qin clan. The Samsara Palace is looking for me, and the Qin clan is also looking for me. The Violet clan and the Morton clan don't know the inside story, and they are also looking for me. Now there are countless people tracking my whereabouts in every country in Eastern Europe. Do you think I want to be in such a disgusting situation?" Tyrant's tone was full of deep resentment. While he was talking, he ate 2 more steaks. "The person who hurt you is the master of Samsara Palace?" Wang Tianzong said thoughtfully, "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure. That bitch." Tyrant growled in a cold tone. "The master of Samsara Palace?" Wang Tianzong hesitated for a while and suddenly asked, "What happened?" Few people in the dark world had seen the master of Samsara Palace. Wang Tianzong had met her. They even confronted each other. But the strange thing was that it was difficult for Wang Tianzong to determine the specific realm of the master of Samsara Palace. More than 3 years ago, the master of Samsara Palace led the 12 supermasters of Samsara to Mount Dibbing. At that time, Wang Tianzong felt that the state of the master of Samsara Palace was very strange. The other party's realm had been fluctuating around the peak of the invincible realm, and it was extremely unstable. Normally, such a state was almost impossible, but it was not absolutely impossible. At least there was such a person around Wang Tianzong. Summer solstice. Could it be that the master of Samsara Palace was also a person who had lost all her foundation? If not, how could her realm fluctuate so obviously? Tyrant stopped eating for a while. His eyes were still filled with rage, but he became serious. The peak of the invincible realm. Tyrant said, "She is definitely at the peak of the invincible realm. It can't be wrong." Wang Tianzong said, "Oh. There were very few invincible realm experts in the Dark World. There were even fewer experts at the peak of the invincible realm. Normally, the experts at the peak of the invincible realm were the top 5 on the divine list. However, in the last few decades, the quality of the divine list had shrunk slightly, so that Gu Xingyun, the god of war of Zhongzhou state, who was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm, also squeezed into the top 5. Tyrant was actually very close to this level. He had a clear fight with the master of Samsara Palace. It was impossible for his judgment of the other party to be wrong. But Wang Tianzong shook his head. There was no relief in his eyes. Instead, he became more and more confused. She is very cunning and powerful, but her sword intent is a little strange. I can't tell the feeling, but it's very strange. If that wasn't the case, how could I have lost so miserably? Bitch. That bitch. Tyrant clenched his fists angrily. You have resentment. Wang Tianzong laughed. Tyrant snorted and didn't say anything. It's good to have resentment. Wang Tianzong continued, I need your resentment. Why don't you and I cooperate? In the current situation, I need your help twice. Tyrant buried his head in eating and didn't seem to hear Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong took out a small bottle and put it in front of Tyrant. There's a balance here. You should have heard of this medicine. It can help you recover most of your injuries in the shortest time. It's one of the core potions of the Wang family of Beihai. The balance bottle was very small. The potion inside showed a strange light blue color. Under the light, it looked extremely magnificent. Tyrant ate without saying a word. He did not even look at the extremely precious balance that was similar to a legendary balance in the Dark World. The gene potion technology of the Wang family of Beihai was absolutely powerful. But no matter how powerful their technology in this aspect was, the medicine that could help an invincible realm expert on the divine list recover most of his injuries in a short time was not something that the Wang family of Beihai could casually make. Balance had always been a legend in the Dark World. Maybe it couldn't compare with the Immortal series, but it was also extremely precious. It appeared twice on the black market and was sold at a sky-high price of more than 11 figures. What followed was also a reign of terror. It was no exaggeration to say that this bottle of balance meant the extra life of an invincible realm expert on the divine list. The life of an invincible realm expert on the divine list was naturally worth 11 figures. Indefinite grace is with me. Wang Tianzong continued, within 3 days, indefinite grace will be handed over to you. By then your injury should be almost healed. I need you to break the current deadlock in Eastern Europe with the strength of your heyday and help me in the final battle. Tyrant's eating speed gradually slowed down. He looked at the balance in front of the table, then raised his head and glanced at Wang Tianzong. He uttered a syllable. Facing Tyrant, Wang Tianzong reached out his hand. His palm was full of calluses. It didn't look like the hand of a peerless patriarch of a wealthy family. It looked very old, but it was also very powerful. After the chaos ends, if I can seize Eastern Europe, I will hand over everything in Eastern Europe to you. Wang Tianzong's tone was calm. Tyrant's body shook. If Wang Tianzong could really seize Eastern Europe, then everything that Tyrant would take care of would be another Polar Ground Alliance. But it was not the Polar Ground Alliance in Eastern Europe. It was the Polar Ground Alliance in Beihai. Tyrant took a deep breath and reached out with both hands. He held Wang Tianzong's palm with one hand. Then he grabbed the bottle of balance with the other hand. I will take action. Tyrant said in a solemn and serious tone. Wang Tianzong nodded and suddenly reminded him, "You should take a bath." The wind and rain were getting cooler. In the water restaurant in the office of the president, Li Tianlan was having dinner with Holy Virgin Angel of the Vatican. Her Highness the Holy Virgin, who was second only to one person in the Vatican, was still wearing a white veil, mysterious and noble. A few male gods' punishment priests stood behind Angel with solemn and serious expressions. Li Tianlan had an appointment with Angel and Arsis. But the latter seemed to want to maintain his dignity as the third on the divine list and did not show up. Li Tianlan didn't care. He cut the steak in front of him casually and said with a chuckle, "Your Highness the Holy Virgin, what does the Vatican think of the current situation in Reki City? It's too chaotic and we can't see the way forward." Angel said with a smile and a soft voice. Li Tianlan nodded and suddenly said, "I don't like chaos. Chaos means darkness. We are all God's people and should be bathed in light. From this point of view, Your Highness, you are very suitable for our faith." Angel's smile was soft and holy. "Your Highness, do you have a faith?" "No," Li Tianlan said slowly, "but it is said that the new stream has been developing very well in Zhongzhou State in recent years. They are all pagans." Angel said softly. Her voice was extremely steady and soft. However, the eyes of several holy punishment priests behind her turned cold when they heard the new stream. "What about Wulan State?" Li Tianlan asked. "As far as I know, many people in Wulan State are believers of the Eastern Church. It seems that when the Patriarch visited Wulan State, there were cheers in Reki City for a long time." "Tut!" Li Tianlan shook his head with a smile. "Those are poor people who have gone astray. I came here on behalf of the Vatican in the hope that they can change their faith. Only the Vatican is the only spokesperson of God in the world." Angel's voice was soft and weak, but there had never been such a gentle method to change one's faith since ancient times. Li Tianlan lowered his eyes and ate. He said calmly, "I can help you." "Thank you, Your Highness." Angel laughed and seemed to be very happy. Li Tianlan said no more and just concentrated on the steak in front of him. Angel was silent for a while and suddenly said, "Your Highness, the Vatican has always been very sincere about bringing friends. We will not let Your Highness help us for free. We will give Your Highness enough compensation." "What do you need, Your Highness?" "I need Arsis to do something for me once," Li Tianlan said. Angel frowned and said nothing. The geographical location of Wulan State was extremely important. It was one of the core places where the Vatican spread its faith. With Li Tianlan's current power in Wulan State, if he was willing to help, it would be easy for the Vatican to change the faith of the entire Wulan State. Such help from the other party was indeed worthy of Arisis's help. Angel thought for a moment and asked, "When is it?" "Tonight." Li Tianlan's tone was calm, but as he spoke, a gust of cold wind seemed to blow through the entire office of the president. "Tonight?" Now, it seemed to be night already. Angel's body trembled slightly and she asked subconsciously, "To whom?" Li Tianlan did not speak. "Time seems to be a little rushed." Angel frowned and said, "There are many things that can't be arranged in time. It must be tonight." Li Tianlan became calmer and calmer. Angel fell silent, as if she was calculating something silently. For the theocracy of Wulan State and several countries around Wulan State, it was not a big problem for Arsis to take action. But as she said, it was indeed inappropriate to take action in such a hurry tonight. Li Tianlan took a sip of red wine. As soon as he picked up the knife and fork, the mobile phone in his pocket suddenly vibrated. Li Tianlan froze and took out his mobile phone. It was not a phone call but a text message. "Tianlan, I'm in Reki City." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. He was silent for a long time before he replied with a text message. This text message was a little long, and he pressed the screen for nearly a minute. Angel quietly watched Li Tianlan send text messages. "An elder." After sending the text message, Li Tianlan casually explained. Without waiting for Angel to speak, he continued, "Arsis cannot take action, but Mellad, the vice commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps, and 100 elite soldiers of the Holy Disarmament Corps have to help me tonight." "Your Highness." Angel took a deep breath and solemnly said, I can agree to your request, but you must tell me, where do you want the elites of the Vatican to go tonight? Li Tianlan lowered his head, finished the last piece of steak and said calmly, the Caesar Hotel. Chapter 479. In the Caesar Hotel. Chen Qinghuan, who could almost be said to have spent every second as long as a year, finally saw Wang Tianzong. Tyrant had left. He was seriously injured. As an invincible realm expert on the divine list, he was like a tramp. It could be imagined how weak his combat capability was. Tyrant did not believe in the Shadow Throne, so Wang Tianzong gave him the address of a small secret base established by the Wang family of Beihai in Eastern Europe. With that balance, Tyrant's injury could be completely stabilized in just a few days. At that time, Tyrant with indefinite grace would be even more terrifying than when he was in the Polar Ground Alliance. He already had a chess piece to break the game. And it was a chess piece that could be controlled. Wang Tianzong could use Tyrant to create all the situations he needed. He was completely relieved and in a good mood. When he saw Qin Qinghuan, he even got up and shook hands with Qin Qinghuan. Even though Qin Qinghuan was a general of Zhongzhou state, he was flattered by such treatment, so he behaved more respectfully and cautiously. Naturally, he did not know what Wang Tianzong was thinking. But if he wanted to control the Snowdance Corps, it would not do any harm to the Wang family of Beihai at present. The identity of Wang Qinglei's confidant might make Wang Tianzong hesitate, but when Wang Tianzong sent him to the Snowdance Corps, he must have made such a plan. All the reasons were there, but Qin Qinghuan was still a little worried about gains and losses. He had made up his mind. If this trip was successful, he would make Li Tianlan a mere figurehead. He did not mind giving up some control of the Snowdance Corps at all. At that time, he would let Wang Tianzong's confidant come over to take over several important positions. Now seeing the smile on Wang Tianzong's face, Chen Qinghuan felt relieved, but he had no time to say anything else. After all, the situation in Reki City was extremely tense, and time was more important than anything else. Li Tianlan's injury might not be cured in a short time, but the mobilization of the Snowdance Corps needed to race against time. Although Qin Qinghuan was an IM and could not see the situation in Reki City clearly, at least he knew that as the strongest party, the Wang family of Beihai needed to break the current situation as soon as possible. So the sooner he took down the Snowdance Corps, the more he could cooperate with Wang Tianzong. Your Majesty! Qin Qinghuan didn't even have time to sit down completely before he said directly, to be honest, I hesitated for a long time when I came to Reki City today. 10 days ago, I spoke to Marshal Li on the phone. Marshal Li ordered me to stabilize the rear and defend IM. It was a strict order. But the situation has been getting worse recently. I heard that other dark forces have even begun to harass the Snowdance Corps and Marshal Li has been unconscious. Finally, I decided to come here. After all, Marshal Li is unconscious, and I should shoulder the Li's vice-marshal. Responsible. Qinggu, Wang Tianzong nodded with a smile, threw a cigarette to Qin Qinghuan, and suddenly said, Do you know that you came 2 days later than I expected? Chen was shocked if Li as Qinglun, said, Tiana's, Chen, Qinglian as if. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he said with a wry smile, I hesitated. After all, Marshal Li's order was on my head, so I had to consider it carefully. Wang Yu Cheng. Qinghuan to say, Li Chen Li, Qinghuan Ling said he. Done. Qin Qinghuan was silent for a while. He suddenly stood up as if he had made up his mind, and bowed deeply to Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong looked at Qin Qinghuan calmly. Your Majesty, I'm incompetent. I'm ashamed of Zhongzhou State and Beihai. Now Marshal Li is in a coma, and I'm ambitious but not talented. In the face of the chaos in Reki City, even if I'm willing to do my best, I'm afraid I can't support the overall situation. I know that Your Majesty has a lot of things to do, but the situation is critical. Qinghuan still has a presumptuous request. If possible, I hope that Your Majesty can temporarily go to the office of the President to preside over the overall situation for the sake of Zhongzhou State and the Snowdance Corps. I'm the Vice-Marshal of the Snowdance Corps. Today, I'm standing here to invite your majesty to the office of the president. Wang Tianzong quietly looked at Qin Qingwan, who was sincere. After a while, he asked, "Are you inviting me?" "On behalf of every warrior of the Snowdance Corps, I invite your majesty. On behalf of everyone in the Snowdance Corps." In other words, Li Tianlan was also represented by Qin Qingwan at this time. Only when your majesty is in charge of the Snowdance Corps can we really deter the dark world. Later, I will report to Xianxia State and elaborate on the problems we encounter today. Please don't have any concerns, your majesty. For the sake of Xianxia State, please go to the office of the president to preside over the overall situation. Qin Qingwan's voice became more and more excited. This time, he did not bend down. Instead, he gave an extremely standard military salute. Qin Qingwan took a deep breath and looked at Qin Qingwan's face. After a long time, he said slowly, "Does the Snowdance Corps know that you're coming?" "Yes, I've informed Deputy Marshal Drifting Cloud before. They may have some misunderstanding about me coming here, but everyone is doing everything for Xianxia State. Although I'm not talented enough, I can handle the daily affairs of the Snowdance Corps. At that time, please deter the invincible realm experts of other dark forces, your majesty." Wang Tianzong laughed. If he went to the office of the president, it would definitely be easy to invite him in but difficult to send him away. This was exactly the effect that Qin Qingwan wanted. Once he took control of the Snowdance Corps and was by Wang Tianzong's side, it would be more than just the invincible realm experts of other dark forces who would be deterred. At that time, even if Li Tianlan woke up, not to mention that he was still seriously injured, even if he fully recovered, he would not be able to do anything. Wang Tianzong stood up and said calmly, "Lead the way. I'll go with you." This was definitely not a polite remark on the scene. This was Wang Tianzong's attitude. It represented Wang Tianzong's recognition of Qin Qingwan's control of the Snowdance Corps. Qin Qingwan was ecstatic. He turned around and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, please." He knew that after tonight, barring any mishaps, he would truly reach the pinnacle of his life. Not only would he attain a lofty status, he would also command his own legion. This was a completely different world from when he was still a high-ranking member of the North Sea Legion who was constantly being ostracized. The wind and rain outside were messy and cold. When Qin Qingwan's military off-road vehicle stopped in the square in front of the office of the president, the elites of the Snowdance Corps, who were temporarily stationed here, stopped the car without hesitation. "I'm Qin Qingwan." Qin Qingwan rolled down the window and said, "Your vice-marshal." There was no anger in his tone. He just looked at the equally serious soldier with a serious face, nodded, and said, "Strong wind and heavy rain, but you are loyal to your duty. Not bad. Although I was in IM before, I have heard of your deeds. You have fought for the prestige of the Snowdance Corps and won glory for the country. Good, very good." The soldier was completely unmoved. He said softly with a poker face, "Please show me your ID." Qin Qingwan took out the ID and handed it to the soldier. Looking at the wind and rain outside the window, there was a flash of fire in his eyes. The ID of the Snowdance Corps was very special. It belonged to the standard style of the Special Warfare Army. There was no troop number, national emblem of Xianxia State, or anything that could represent the belonging and position of a soldier. There was only an extremely complicated steel seal with a code and the sword edge logo of the Snowdance Corps. It could not be imitated, and it was easy to identify. The soldier of the Snowdance Corps looked at the national emblem seriously and frowned slightly. He might not understand the game and calculation of the upper level of the Snowdance Corps, but he was born in the Border Control Corps. As for the vice-marshal of the Beihai Corps, he knew that the other party's position was not very consistent with his. But now that the ID was there, he had no reason not to let him go. After hesitating for a moment, he handed the ID to Qin Qingwan and saluted. "Vice-marshal, please." Qin Qingwan nodded with satisfaction. Suddenly, he said casually, "How is Marshal Li?" "His Highness is fine." The soldier said expressionlessly. Qin Qingwan drove with a smile, but a trace of gloom flashed in his eyes. The commander of the Snowdance Corps was the marshal. The most proper form of address for Li Tianlan should be Marshal Li. But until now, Chen Qinghuan had never heard of the name Marshal Li in the Snowdance Corps. When everyone mentioned Li Tianlan, there was only one name. Your Highness. What did this mean? The wind and rain are swift and violent. The green off-road vehicle drove into the square. After passing through several checkpoints along the way, it finally approached the gate of the presidential palace. Wang Tianzong, who had been silently observing all this along the way, suddenly said, "The Snowdance Corps is indeed a strong army." His tone was a little indifferent, but also a little regretful. 3 years ago, the decisive battle of Tiandu and the border battle broke out one after another. Wang Tianzong went to the border in person. The first murderous weapon, human emperor, opened fire. The clear light illuminated the entire dark world. That battle was a deal between Wang Tianzong and the Dongqing clan. The attack of the human emperor was supposed to send the entire Thunderbolt battalion to Tiannan and hand it over to Dijiang. But in the end he only got half of it. But now, half of it was given to Li Tianlan. This was a truly powerful army. Even the North Sea Legion, which was known as the most powerful legion in the world, didn't have many elite soldiers. Every time he thought of the tens of thousands of troops, Wang Tianzong felt that he had been schemed against. He even suspected that the Dongqing clan had calculated all this 3 years ago, so they used the Thunderbolt battalion to exchange the human emperor's fire. Otherwise, today, with Wang Tianzong and the human emperor in hand, even if they were not the chosen one, what was there to be afraid of in the face of the so-called chaos? The off-road vehicle stopped at the gate of the presidential palace. Chen Qinghuan personally held an umbrella for Wang Tianzong. When they were about to enter the door, a person came out in a hurry. He saw Wang Tianzong, and Wang Tianzong also saw him. Both of them were slightly stunned. Going out? Wang Tianzong laughed and said in a gentle voice. Qin Shilai nodded, and he became calmer. He had challenged Wang Tianzong 3 times and retreated unscathed 3 times. It seemed that he owed the Wang family of Beihai a great favor, but in fact, the 2 sides had cooperated, and no one had treated the other badly. Now that the Qin clan was on Li Tianlan's side, the old affection had finally disappeared with the storm in Eastern Europe. Wang Tianzong nodded and didn't say much. The moment the 2 sides passed by, he frowned and suddenly felt that something was wrong. Qin Shilai seemed to be too calm when he saw him. At the same time, in the floating restaurant of the presidential palace, Li Tianlan and Holy Virgin Angel's dinner was coming to an end. Drifting Cloud hurried over and said with a solemn and excited look, "Your Highness, His Majesty Sword Emperor and Vice Marshal Chen are here." Li Tianlan nodded, picked up a snow-white square towel, wiped his mouth, and suddenly laughed. Then closed the door. Chapter 480. The wind and rain fell. The thick and cold night enveloped the entire Reki city. The noise of the city gradually quieted down, and the roaring wind and rain seemed to be the only sound in the whole world. The rain fell in a hurry, wild and cold. In a medium-sized church in the west of Reki city, Arsis, the commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps of the Vatican, had just finished praying. He knelt on the ground and looked up at the cross above. His eyes flickered, and no one knew what he was thinking. Behind Arsis was a mass of dark figures. The light in the church was extremely faint. The crowd in black almost merged with the darkness, which looked extremely strange. But everyone was kneeling and praying. In the silent atmosphere, the whole church was devout. Arsis stood up silently, walked to the door of the church, and looked at the rain under the night sky in silence. He suddenly felt that the night was incomparably oppressive, with a suffocating feeling that made it hard for him to breathe. Arsis frowned slightly and whispered, "I don't feel good." "You don't have to think too much." A voice sounded behind Arsis. Mellad, the second commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps, walked over slowly and said respectfully, "I will take care of all this." Arsis narrowed his eyes and seemed to hesitate. "No matter what, it's much better than you doing it yourself," Mellad said calmly. Arsis had a secret that was not a secret. He was the 3rd on the divine list in the Dark World today, and he used to be the 2nd. But whether he was the third or the second, his position didn't seem to be very stable. His innate talent was undoubtedly astonishing. However, no matter how amazing one's aptitude was, there would always be a limit. Trying his best to enter the peak of the invincible realm was Erisis's limit. He had a firm foothold in this realm, but he was no longer able to pursue the peak of the invincible realm. In the past few decades, the reason why he had been able to stay in the top 3 of the divine list was that, in addition to his own terrifying strength, the most important thing was the Pope's coronation. The coronation was similar to mental control or mental hypnosis. In the state of absolute concentration, the Pope's coronation could stimulate a person's will to the greatest extent, so that the person's will, reaction speed, and other comprehensive qualities could be improved a little. This improvement was almost meaningless to experts in the ice-condensing realm and the fire-flaming realm. But for experts at the half-step invincible realm and the peak of the invincible realm, the improvement was great. This small increment often meant a whole new world. After the coronation, Arcis had the strength of the top 3 or even the top 2 on the divine list. However, the coronation was not permanent. Such an upgrade would also consume energy. The coronation of the Pope could probably support Arcis for 3 all-out battles. After 3 times, he would fall into a period of weakness due to excessive mental exhaustion. In other words, Arcis, who was in Eastern Europe but had never made a move, was his true peak state. Li Tianlan asked Arcis to take action tonight. In addition to taking care of Eris's dignity, the main reason why Saintus Angel was in a dilemma was because of this. If Arcis didn't make a move, Mellad and the 100 Saint Warriors would. But as the time approached, the uneasiness in Eris's heart grew stronger. His character was originally extremely decisive, but at this time, he hesitated. The Holy Disarmament Corps brought by Arcis was not small. But what Li Tianlan wanted were elites. This kind of deal had never been faked. The other party wanted elites. If ordinary warriors were sent out, even a thunder-shocking realm expert could see that something was wrong, not to mention deceiving Li Tianlan. Therefore, those who were about to set off with Mellad were the real elites of the Holy Disarmament Corps. If things didn't go well tonight, once these people were killed, it would definitely be a loss that could not be ignored for the Vatican. Arcis would also lose a considerable part of the super combat force that could be used in Eastern Europe. Is Li Tianlan trustworthy? Arcis suddenly asked. He has no reason not to cooperate with us. Mellad said softly, the Vatican is not hostile to Zhongzhou state. What we want is theocracy, and what he wants is military power. In a short time, he needs us to help him consolidate his position in Wulan state in terms of faith. And we also need to use his power to spread faith. From this point of view, he is trustworthy. What about from other aspects? Arcis said quietly. From other aspects, it was naturally whether Li Tianlan could defend Wulan state. Wulan state now belonged to the Snowdance Corps. No one denied this. And what the Dark Forces wanted to do now was to overthrow this fact. If Li Tianlan got Wulan state and could defend it, then Wulan state would truly belong to him. Mellad thought for a moment. He said calmly, let's see tonight. Arcis was silent for a long time. After a long time, he whispered, it's too sudden. Mellad smiled and didn't say anything. Li Tianlan had just woken up today. As soon as he figured out the situation, he took advantage of the situation to make this move. There was an element of coincidence in it. But he also appreciated the decisiveness of the young highness very much. Be careful on the way. Arcis ordered. Mellad bowed and responded. When he straightened up, Aris's figure had disappeared from his sight. Mellad turned around slowly. The 100 Saint Warriors in the church had finished praying. This might be the last time many people prayed in this life. Magical faith. Mellad sighed with emotion in his heart, but his expression was still solemn. He waved his hand and said calmly, let's go. Our destination is the Caesar Hotel. The darkness was as dark as ink. In the magnificent suite of the Caesar Hotel, King Tong stood in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window and looked out of the window at the never-ending wind and rain in the night. She felt a little uneasy for no reason. Poppy, who was reporting the recent situation of the Shadow Throne, saw her unconsciously. So when she finished her report, he finally couldn't help asking, "Your Highness, is there something on your mind?" King Tong raised her eyebrows, and a trace of confusion flashed in her eyes. Poppy looked at King Tong with concern. He looked a little nervous. "It's okay." King Tong took a deep breath and said quietly, "Is everything arranged?" "Everything is ready." Poppy smiled. King Tong nodded. Wang Tianzong said that he had waited for Qin Shinghuan for 2 days. In fact, this sentence was equivalent to saying that the Shadow Throne and the Wang family of Beihai had waited for Qin Shinghuan for 2 days. The 5 Eastern European countries centered on Wulan State were a large area of interest that was enough to make everyone go crazy. The Wang family of Beihai would not give up, nor would the Shadow Throne. But Li Tianlan took the lead. From Wang Tianzong's standpoint, Zhongzhou State was watching him, so he wanted to get the 5 Eastern European countries. He had to take down the Snowdance Corps first. The arrival of Qin Shinghuan was the key for the Wang family of Beihai to take down the Snowdance Corps. Wang Tianzong and Qin Shinghuan had left. Tyrant had been found. The indefinite grace was on the way. The Shadow Throne was preparing. Li Tianlan was in a coma. Everything was ready. Was there anything more perfect than this? Wang Tianzong started to work tonight. The Shadow Throne also had to start to work. When everything broke out, the Wang family of Beihai and the Shadow Throne had to create a favorable situation for themselves as soon as possible. Wait for the accurate news from His Majesty the Sword Emperor. King Tong's tone was calm, but she clenched her fists subconsciously. Calmness often represented confidence. And confidence represented fearlessness at any time. Qin Shilai was fearless. Wang Tianzong could clearly see the indifference and calmness in Qin Shilai's eyes. He suddenly felt a little weird. The office of the president was solemn and quiet. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes and looked around. The rain made the lights of the office of the president dim. The patrol team of the Snowdance Corps was quietly patrolling in the office of the president. Everything was normal. Wang Tianzong's footsteps paused subconsciously. "Your Majesty?" Qin Shinghuan looked back at Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong looked at his expression carefully, nodded and said calmly, "Let's go." The two of them went straight to the conference room. Qin Shinghuan believed that the news that he had entered the office of the president had spread. It was the best choice to go to the conference room now. The door of the conference room was right in front of him. Qin Shinghuan took a deep breath. His eyes were red, and his whole body was full of undisguised excitement. Pushing open the door, what greeted him was the real peak of his life. Qin Shinghuan's palm trembled, and he forced himself to calm down and pushed the door open. The spacious conference room was full of people. It seemed to be a respect for him, the vice-marshal. Qin Shinghuan nodded with satisfaction and instinctively looked at the position where he should sit. The main seat. There was a young man on the main seat, who was also looking at him with a smile. Qin Shinghuan suddenly blinked his eyes and shook his head. His face turned pale in an instant, and his eyes turned to drifting cloud with some resentment. Li Tianlan. How could it be Li Tianlan? From the spirit that Li Tianlan showed, Qin Shinghuan could be sure that Li Tianlan's combat capability had been restored perfectly. But how could all this be possible? Marshal Li. Qin Shinghuan lost his composure and exclaimed under the agitation. A strange light suddenly flashed in Wang Tianzong's eyes, and his brows furrowed more and more silently. "Who asked you to come?" Li Tianlan looked at Qin Shinghuan and asked with a smile, holding his cheeks. "I." Qin Shinghuan opened his mouth. Sword Emperor was behind him. But in a short time, Qin Shinghuan broke out in a cold sweat. "Your Highness has been unconscious." Qin Shinghuan also called Li Tianlan, "Your Highness," in nervousness. "I'm sitting here, and you say that I'm unconscious. Are you blind?" Li Tianlan's voice grew softer. Qin Shinghuan's face turned livid for a moment. He lowered his head and remained silent. He really didn't know that Li Tianlan had woken up. In fact, from the second he saw Li Tianlan sitting here, his whole mind had been completely blank. "I remember I said that if I let you stay you either carry out the order or I will carry out the military law, right?" Li Tianlan looked at Qin Qinghuan for a while and suddenly said. A great sense of crisis suddenly enveloped them. Qin Qinghuan trembled all over. He turned around instinctively and shouted, "Your Majesty, save!" Tianlan suddenly clenched his fists. In an instant, countless sword intents surged from all directions in the conference room, all rushing to Qin Qinghuan. Wang Tianzong put his palm on Qin Qinghuan's shoulder. Silently, all the sword intents in the conference room had completely disappeared. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at Wang Tianzong coldly. Marshal Li has just woken up. Why are you so angry? Wang Tianzong said calmly. I'm not angry. Li Tianlan said blandly. His voice was getting louder and louder. You call me Marshal Li, so you should know my identity. I'm the commander of the Snow Dance Corps. My words are the military order in the Snow Dance Corps. His loud voice came out of the conference room and echoed between heaven and earth. It was extremely loud and dignified. Now Vice Marshal Qin Qinghuan has disobeyed my military order. What should I do? There was a moment of silence. In the next second, a majestic and sonorous voice suddenly rang out. Loud noises converged from all directions, forming a torrent of sound. The voice spread throughout the office of the president. The wind and rain were turbulent, and the world was shaking, with an invincible power. Li Tianlan's voice spread outside the office of the president. In response to him was the roar of tens of thousands of elite soldiers of the Snow Dance Corps with all their might. What should he do if he disobeyed the order? Die. Chapter 481. Every force in the Dark World had a relatively mature base in Reki City. This kind of base was not to deal with Li Tianlan, but for Reki City and Wulan State. Wulan State was not the strongest in Europe, and it was not even a first-tier power. However, the geographical location of this country was definitely the most delicate. Occupying this place was tantamount to controlling the throat of Eastern Europe and Western Europe. The huge benefits represented behind it were enough to make any force and any country drool. There were many similar places all over the world. The Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City had always been extremely sensitive to foreign forces, but there were also strongholds of various forces inside Zhongzhou State, but they were not large. Other than that, there were strongholds of major forces in every important place in the world, such as Federal City and Gotham in Star Nation, England's Fog City, and so on. Although the status of Reki City was not as important as that of the major international cities, from the perspective of interests, it was more important than any international city. The whole of Europe was at stake here. So it was no exaggeration to say that almost as long as the major forces existed, their bases in Reki City would last. The base of the Heroes Club in Reki City was very obvious. Towering in the center of the city, the Hero Building and the iconic forest emblem on the building were the most representative symbols they left here. The Hero Building could be said to be one of the tallest buildings in Reki City. As a super large comprehensive office building, there were nearly 70 different companies operating at the same time. The Hero Group alone occupied the top 4 floors of the building, overlooking the entire Reki City day and night. The president of the Heroes Club had been living here since he arrived in Reki City. The top floor of the Hero Building had become his personal space. After arriving in Reki City, he rarely gave any clear orders. Most of the time, he stayed quietly on the top floor of the Hero Building, observing the situation in Eastern Europe or meditating. The people in the Hero Building almost never bothered their president. The most spacious and luxurious office on the top floor had become the forbidden area of the entire building. The forbidden area meant that almost no one could get close to it. Therefore, when the president of the Heroes Club saw the envelope that suddenly appeared on the table, he was extremely surprised. The content of the letter was very simple. There was only one time and one badge. A throne surrounded by light gray wings was imprinted on the paper, vivid and lifelike. Below the badge there was a time. August 27th. Today was August 27th. The president of the Heroes Club looked at the simple but complicated letter in his hand. He had been silent for nearly half an hour. The soft light shone on the paper, and the snow-white paper was dyed slightly yellow. The yellowish letter had an incomparably bright and brilliant color on it. It was a red line. It was as if someone had intentionally or unintentionally scratched a line on the paper. And this red line happened to fall on the badge of the Shadow Throne. This red line had a completely different feeling from the entire letter. It seemed to be written casually, but in the eyes of the president of the Heroes Club, he subconsciously narrowed his eyes. The red line was straight and swift. The president lowered his head and stared at the letter. Wherever the red lines passed, all he could see was dominance and sharpness. Vaguely, he seemed to understand the meaning of the letter, and his eyes flashed with a hint of excitement. "Your Highness Charlemagne," a voice with a strange rhythm suddenly rang out. The voice was soft and quiet without any impurities. It was extremely comfortable to listen to. The Hero Guild Master raised his head, threw the letter away, and asked, "What do you think?" A slender and soft hand reached out and caught the letter. The soft light shone on the hand, emitting a delicate and charming halo. But the other party's whole body was blurred. The world was extremely real, but the other party seemed to be standing in the void. Even the light was swallowed up by the gloomy void. The blurry and flickering figure could not be identified as a man or a woman. He looked down at the letter in his hand and frowned faintly. "Who wants to eradicate the Shadow Throne? To be exact, I want to drive the Shadow Throne out of Eastern Europe." President Charlemagne's tone was full of depth. "But the Shadow Throne has invested a lot in Eastern Europe." He put the letter back on the table and said softly. "So?" Charlemagne laughed. His smile was cold, but his eyes were full of fire. "I'm a little tempted." The Shadow Throne had invested a lot in Eastern Europe this time. Queen Qingtong was at the Caesar Hotel. The entire Caesar Hotel was filled with people from the Shadow Throne. And this did not include the base they had established in Eastern Europe. If they could catch all these people tonight, especially Qingtong, if she also died here, the Shadow Throne, which had suffered a great loss of vitality, would probably become the next Polar Ground Alliance the next day. The relationship between the Heroes Club and the Wang family of Beihai was very bad. The death of the old patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai had a lot to do with the Heroes Club. Could be said to be a feud. The reason why the relationship between the Heroes Club and the Wang family of Beihai was so stiff was largely because of the Shadow Throne. This may be the best chance to defeat the Shadow Throne. Charlemagne said, "But I'm not sure if this is a trap or a cooperation. Mitchell, I need your advice." "Who wrote the letter?" Mitchell asked after a moment of silence. "There is Li Tianlan's sword intent in the letter. The channel should be from the Samsara Palace." Charlemagne said faintly. He suddenly laughed. "I've long heard that the intelligence system of the Samsara Palace is very terrifying, but I didn't expect it to be so terrifying. This letter can appear around me without anyone noticing, even you. I think we should check which people around us are pawns of the Samsara Palace." "Now is not the time." Mitchell thought for a moment and shook his head. "The other party is demonstrating. It's really not the time." Charlemagne patted the letter on the table. "The most important thing is tonight." "Are you sure it's Li Tianlan?" Mitchell seemed to be murmuring to himself. "This sword intent. It's very similar. But I haven't seen him fight in front of me, so I can't be absolutely sure." Charlemagne said slowly. Mitchell fell silent. After a long time, he slowly said, "We can be sure that there is a deep conflict between Li Tianlan and Wang Tianzong. Even from the news we received, Li Tianlan will face a great survival crisis in Eastern Europe, and most of the crisis comes from Wang Tianzong. So it's logical that he wants to borrow strength to destroy the Shadow Throne. As for us, we didn't have much resentment with Li Tianlan before. The Heroes Club should not be the first target that Li Tianlan wants to deal with. Tonight will be an opportunity to make the Shadow Throne suffer heavy losses. Li Tianlan needs to borrow strength. In other words, he needs our strength to have the confidence to hit the Shadow Throne hard. Maybe it's not just our strength. Since he wants to borrow strength, why not borrow all of it? I'm afraid that all the forces have received similar letters by now, right?" Charlemagne said lightly. "In that case, we have nothing to worry about," Mitchell said. Charlemagne raised his eyebrows. "Do you mean that we should get involved?" "You stay." Mitchell said, "I'll go." Charlemagne was silent for a moment. "Worried?" Mitchell laughed. "What are you talking about?" Charlemagne shook his head with a smile. "It's just your realm." Everyone knew that the president of the Heroes Club was very powerful. But it was also well known that the president of the Heroes Club was the only invincible realm expert. No one knew that Mitchell, who did not hold any position in the Heroes Club, had recently broken through to the invincible realm. He was a new invincible realm expert in the Dark World. Only Mitchell and Charlemagne knew about this. This was also the biggest trump card of the Heroes Club. Even if we don't expose our strength, it's not a problem to protect ourselves. Tonight's trip, the principle of the Heroes Club is to add icing on the cake, not to provide timely help. Charlemagne was silent for a moment and finally nodded. Mitchell turned around slowly. "I don't like the name of the Heroes Group." Charlemagne suddenly said, "If we can succeed in the trip to Eastern Europe, the Heroes Club will still be the Heroes Club. How about changing the name of the Heroes Group?" Mitchell's body froze. "Change what name?" he asked. "Habsburg Group," Charlemagne said blandly. Mitchell turned around slowly. The president of the Heroes Club had never had a surname. But as Charlemagne's confidant for many years, Mitchell naturally knew what Charlemagne's surname was. Habsburg. That was Charlemagne's surname. The most important thing was that it was not a South American surname. It was a surname of the Germanic Empire in Europe. In some ancient times, the surname Habsburg almost represented the history of the Germanic Empire to some extent. However, now this surname had become a surname that neither of the two major forces in Europe was willing to mention. The Vatican did not like to hear this surname. Rothschild did not like it either. Therefore, the Heroes Club did not like the Vatican or Rothschild. Tonight, you not only want to kill King Tong, but also want to inflict serious damage on the Vatican? Mitchell turned to look at Charlemagne and asked, "Once Arcis is dead I can?" Charlemagne said calmly, "But Li Tianlan has cooperation with the Vatican." "Tonight?" Mitchell frowned. "Arcis probably won't take action tonight, so we won't have too much conflict with the Vatican. As for the future," Charlemagne laughed. "Li Tianlan can cooperate with the Vatican, but we can cooperate with Tribulation." "Tribulation?" Mitchell raised his eyebrows. In the past 3 years, there had only been 2 newly advanced invincible realm experts in the Dark World. One was him. The other was Tribulation, who had broken through in the final battle of Heaven Capital more than 3 years ago. Mitchell knew the name Tribulation, but at this time, he couldn't help but confirm it. "Sai City?" Charlemagne suddenly burst out laughing. He laughed for a long time before he stood up and walked to the window. Looking down at Reki City in the wind and rain, he whispered, "I know a secret." This is the first half of the chapter. I feel uncomfortable all over and have a fever of more than 38 degrees. Every time the season changes, I must catch a cold. This has really become a routine. Chapter 482. Wang Tianzong heard the response of the Snowdance Corps. Reki City was not big. The roar of tens of thousands of people in unison was like thunder. With an overwhelming power, it swept through the whole city in an instant. Everyone in the city heard the response of the Snowdance Corps. In the room on the top floor of the Hero Building, President Charlemagne looked in the direction of the presidential palace. The wind and rain in the city were chaotic. However, the deafening roar continued to reverberate with a buzzing sound. A row of black motorcades slowly drove out of the Heroes Building. Charlemagne looked on quietly, and his expression grew calmer. West City Church. In the middle building, Arcis also heard the roar of the Snowdance Corps. He didn't understand Chinese. However, one could clearly sense the naked killing intent in this earth-shattering voice. Arcis thought of tonight's plan, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. His smile was happy and satisfied. The plan had already begun. Moreover, Li Tianlan was credible. East of the city, Star State Embassy. Cass Rotter, the leader of the Men in Black, known as the top master in North America, had also received the same letter as President Charlemagne. He lowered his head and stared at the envelope. In the direction of the office of the president, a voice like a tsunami passed through the wind and rain. On the envelope, the red line streaked across the emblem of the Shadow Throne, and it seemed to become more and more fierce. Cass Rotter suddenly stood up. "Your Highness." A burly man from Star State walked over and said respectfully, "Contact Hong Kong." Castro said calmly, "Fantasy World and Men in Black attack together. Target, Caesar Hotel." Snow Country. Mormons. In the basement, Qin Weibai slowly walked out with a pale and tired face. When she passed by the most flowering garden in the manor, she saw Tribulation standing in the flowers for the first time. Tribulation stood under a cherry tree and looked at Qin Weibai calmly. "Martial uncle likes cherry blossoms?" Qin Weibai asked knowingly with a smile. She kept calling him Uncle Master Jia. Of course, this was how Li Tianlan addressed him. Tribulation was silent for a while. No one knew what he was thinking of, but his eyes were in a trance. Then he remembered the business, shook his head, and said, "There's a change in Reki City." Qin Weibai's voice was clear and light. She never seemed to be flustered or anxious. No matter what the situation was, she was always as calm as still water. She was indifferent, calm, elegant, and perfect. Tribulation handed a fax in his hand to Qin Weibai. "This is the information from a man named Gandalf. He seems to be the person in charge of your intelligence in Reki City." Tribulation said. Qin Weibai took the fax and quickly looked down at it. Then he read it again carefully. The content of the fax was very short and concise. Qin Weibai read it twice to make sure that she did not miss anything. Then she chuckled. She was really beautiful. That kind of perfection that couldn't be described with any beautiful words had a kind of dreamy coldness and elegance. Along with her smile, the entire night sky seemed to become incomparably brilliant. Tribulation froze for a moment. She had never expected Qin Weibai to react like this. He was not from the Samsara Palace. But Qin Weibai was not on guard against him, so he could see the faxed information from Reki City. Strictly speaking, Li Tianlan's plan tonight actually conflicted with Qin Weibai's plan in many places. It would also mess up Qin Weibai's arrangement. Qin Weibai might not be angry and complain to Li Tianlan, but she should at least show some concern about her future plans. But now, Qin Weibai was really happy. "Are you happy?" Tribulation was a little confused. "Why wouldn't I be happy?" Qin Weibai chuckled and said softly, "My man is becoming more and more mature, strong, and independent. He has gradually integrated into the general trend of the dark world and began to take advantage of it. He has his own plan and is working hard for it. I'm his woman. Shouldn't I be happy?" "But he messed up your plan," Tribulation said. Qin Weibai nodded. "But those plans were originally for him. Now he has his own direction of action. As for my plan, I can modify it. I think many people are mistaken. Everything I do is for him, not what he has to do according to my plan. He is my man, not a vassal. On the contrary, the real situation is that I should take him as the master. His current plan is feasible. In that case, why should I be unhappy? But if he cooperates, your plan, I'm cooperating with him." Qin Weibai said, "All the time." "You're too sensitive." Tribulation was silent for a while and said, "Do you think, Martial Uncle, you think too much?" Qin Weibai looked at Tribulation with soft eyes. "I'm not so sensitive. I care about Tianlan's emotions, but I care more about his future. His plan is indeed feasible, so I'm willing to cooperate with him to modify my plan instead of letting him cooperate with me. Now Tianlan is becoming more and more mature. I just want to tell him in advance that maybe he is carrying a lot of things, such as the Samsara Palace, the Li family, Sai City, and the Dongcheng clan. But no matter how much he carries, he is still himself." Tribulation frowned. There were too many meanings in Qin Weibai's words, so he didn't understand what Qin Weibai meant. If he didn't understand, he wouldn't think about it for the time being. Tribulation asked directly, "How are you going to modify your plan?" Qin Weibai was silent for a long time. She looked at Tribulation with respect in her eyes, but more of imperceptible sympathy and pity. Now, she whispered, let's go to Reki City. The earth-shattering roar finally passed. But the entire office of the president seemed to be trembling in the huge sound waves. Wang Tianzong was silent. Chen Qinghuan's whole body was shaking uncontrollably. From the first time he saw Li Tianlan, he already knew that he would lose. He did have Wang Tianzong by his side now. Wang Tianzong also supported him to take control of the Snowdance Corps and make Li Tianlan a mere figurehead. But all that was under the condition that Li Tianlan was not awake. Now Li Tianlan was awake. Li Tianlan wanted to kill him. The Snowdance Corps also wanted to kill him. What would Wang Tianzong choose? The most fatal thing was that Chen Qinghuan knew very well that he was not Wang Tianzong's confidant. Wang Tianzong had no reason to protect him. Now his only hope of survival depended on whether Wang Tianzong really thought that he, as a chess piece, was useful enough. Wang Tianzong seemed to be weighing the pros and cons. Protecting Chen Qinghuan was tantamount to preserving the hope of the Wang family of Beihai to continue to get involved in the Snowdance Corps in the future. If he didn't protect Chen Qinghuan, from his standpoint, in addition to needing more energy to control Li Tianlan in the future, the only loss he would suffer was his face. Now he was about to break through. If he broke through successfully, it really didn't matter whether Chen Qinghuan was in the Snowdance Corps or not. And if he died, it would be Wang Qinglei's loss. It had nothing to do with him. But was the Sword Emperor's face worthless? Wang Tianzong looked up at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan stood in front of him with a cold face. In this state, Li Tianlan exuded an almost invincible momentum from head to toe. The essence, qi, and spirit of the entire Snowdance Corps seemed to have been completely integrated with him. Such a Li Tianlan was terrible. It was not his strength that was terrible. It was his fearless sharpness at this moment. Do you want to kill your main deputy? Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes. I'm just executing military law. Li Tianlan took a step forward. I want to protect him. Wang Tianzong said word by word. No. Li Tianlan's answer was resolute. As he spoke, he took a second step forward. Not everyone is qualified to attack my Snowdance Corps. I respect you as the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State. I will pretend that what happened tonight never happened. I can also ignore the purpose of your coming here tonight. But Chen Qinghuan doesn't obey military orders. If I want him to die tonight, he must die. The silver light flickered slightly. Falling stars appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. The silver blade was cold and sharp. Li Tianlan took the fourth step and said calmly, I'll see who dares to stop me. The void distorted imperceptibly. A dazzling beam of light suddenly lit up in front of Chen Qinghuan. The beam of light illuminated the night, evaporated the wind and rain, and directly blocked Chen Qinghuan behind it. Wang Tianzong's eyes became completely cold, with an undisguised hidden anger. Try to kill me. His tone was indifferent. All of a sudden, Li Tianlan laughed wildly. The silver sword light gathered in his hand. At this moment, Li Tianlan gave up all his defense and exposed his body to Wang Tianzong's sword intent. His posture was indescribably wild. Try to kill me. His voice was impassioned. He suddenly sped up and walked directly to Chen Qinghuan. The distance between the two was only dozens of meters. Li Tianlan gave up all his defense and strode forward. Wang Tianzong's sword intent was there. As long as he entered the range of the sword intent within 10 meters, Li Tianlan would definitely die. Everyone knew this. But Li Tianlan walked over without flinching. Wang Tianzong stared at Li Tianlan's eyes. Li Tianlan's eyes were as hot as a burning wildfire. His pace was getting faster and faster. 20 meters. 15 meters. 12 meters. Without any defense or retreat, he moved forward all the way. 11 meters. Facing the death line that was enough to kill him in an instant, Li Tianlan did not hesitate and stepped forward. The moment his foot was about to fall, Wang Tianzong's sword intent quietly retreated half a meter. At the same time, Li Tianlan stepped forward again. A drop of sweat flowed down Wang Tianzong's temple and was instantly evaporated. The sword intent kept retreating. Li Tianlan moved forward all the way. Chen Qinghuan's whole body was trembling violently. Boom! There was a sudden roar in the night sky in the distance. The night full of wind and rain was illuminated for a moment. A long tail flame directly traversed the night sky. Then there was an earth-shattering explosion and fire. Wang Tianzong suddenly turned around and looked at the place where the explosion sounded. The silver sword in tent behind him suddenly exploded, accompanied by Qin Qinghuan's desperate scream. The blood rain flew and fell to the ground, and was washed away by the rain. Wang Tianzong still did not look back. Deafening explosions rang out incessantly, and the roars lingered on endlessly. Wang Tianzong was silent for a long time, then slowly turned around, looked at Li Tianlan, and said word by word, "Caesar Hotel?" "Caesar Hotel." Li Tianlan's tone was calm. The Caesar Hotel was full of people from the Shadow Throne. It was also Wang Tianzong's most important ally at this time. Li Tianlan predicted that Qin Qinghuan would bring Wang Tianzong here, so he directly sent someone to attack the Caesar Hotel. A cold, killing intent gradually filled Wang Tianzong's eyes. He nodded slowly and said, "Good, very good, but do you think it's too late?" "I think it's too late." Li Tianlan put away the sword edge. Qin Qinghuan had become a corpse in front of him. But Wang Tianzong had no time to care about this. In the continuous explosion, he turned directly to the door. Li Tianlan's slow voice sounded behind him, sounding extremely gloomy. "Your Majesty, please wait." Chapter 483. The disaster came all of a sudden. On the night of August 17th, in the cold wind and rain, the Caesar Hotel, which had been calm and luxurious a second ago, burst into flames without warning. With a sharp whistling sound, the cannonball broke through the air, and the long tail flame became the most brilliant light in the night sky. The whole Caesar Hotel was shaking and shaking. The raging fire swept through the whole hotel and was extinguished by the rain, turning into black smoke. The thick and suffocating smoke and dust poured into the hotel along the broken glass. With the hotel as the center, the power of the whole neighborhood was completely cut off. In a short time before the hotel's generator was started, the whole Caesar Hotel became completely chaotic. King Tong, who had just laid down and not fallen asleep, got up and rushed to the window as fast as she could. The entire night sky was almost completely lit up. Shells rained down one after another with an unreasonable momentum. The tail flames were burning. Under the rainy sky, it was as if stars were falling crazily. Amidst the deafening roar, a corner of the luxurious Caesar Hotel was blasted into pieces. Countless stones fell down. Flames and smoke rose in the air. The sound of the stairs cracking could be heard continuously. It was so dense that it was impossible to hear it. In the distance, the neighborhood near Reki City had become an ocean. An ocean of people. A sea of people. Densely packed armies rushed out from every corner. Armored vehicles and even main battle tanks swaggered through the streets. In the distant streets and alleys, trucks transporting soldiers moved forward with indomitable will. Accompanied by artillery fire dancing in the night sky, the entire Caesar Hotel was like a target in the enemy's artillery fire. It was bombarded until it was on the verge of collapse. King Tong's face instantly turned pale. Reki City might now have gathered all the super forces in the Dark World. But there was only one force that could openly use cannonballs, armored vehicles, main battle tanks, and troops to wipe out the enemy. Only the government of Wulan State. And now there was only one person who could order the government of Wulan State. Li Tianlan. King Tong gritted her teeth and suddenly screamed. Phew! An extremely shrill voice appeared in King Tong's sight with an incomparably brilliant light. The light, which seemed to be the color of death, carried an unparalleled aura of danger and instantly occupied all of King Tong's consciousness. King Tong's pupils suddenly contracted, and she screamed with all her might, "Rush out! Leave the hotel!" The incomparably brilliant light in his line of sight suddenly grew larger. The blazing temperature evaporated the wind and rain, and it crashed into the center of the hotel. The entire space suddenly fluctuated, and the huge impact formed a visible airwave. The flames rushed up, and in the loud explosion, the entire hotel kept collapsing. The walls, glass, furniture, steel. The sound of the explosion was earth-shattering. The Caesar Hotel, which had stood in Reki City for many years, completely collapsed. Billowing black smoke and thick smoke and dust flew into the sky, and large pieces of stones fell down like the end of the world. King Tong's figure was also falling. Countless broken stones almost drowned her. She was still able to maintain her balance, and all the boulders that approached her were shattered into powder. The rumbling of the collapsing hotel continued. In the thick smoke and dust, flashes of lightning appeared one after another. There were a lot of thunderbolts. But King Tong's heart kept sinking. The entire Caesar Hotel was filled with people from the Shadow Throne. Even the waiters were the same. This shot had completely destroyed the entire Caesar Hotel, and there would not even be any accidental deaths. Now, there were still many survivors. Compared with the number of people from the Shadow Throne in the Caesar Hotel, the number made King Tong's whole body twitch. She remembered the meeting with Li Tianlan that day. She thought of his eyes. Indifferent, calm, cruel, and vicious. The wind and rain fell on her through the smoke and dust. King Tong suddenly felt that the midsummer in Eastern Europe was really cold. It was so cold that even though she was the queen of the Shadow Throne, she saw the huge shadow on the road ahead at this time. A few spots of light seemed to light up in the huge shadow. The spots of light quickly drew closer. A squadron of fighter jets approached quickly. The perfect streamlined shape of the fighter jets looked extremely strange and cold. King Tong opened her domain with all her strength. The moment the domain spread, the fighter jets, which had become clear, suddenly opened fire. The intensive sound of the machine guns rang out without interruption in the explosion and the loud sound of falling. In an instant, the whole night sky seemed to be sparkling with sparks. The sparks were swift and fierce, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. It was completely like a rainstorm. Tens of thousands of bullets desperately swept the ruins of the Caesar Hotel. Blood and screams echoed in the ruins. Outside the ruins of the hotel, the army was pressing on. There was no room for any of this. Kill them all. Please stay, Your Majesty. Li Tianlan's voice was very light, but it was extremely gloomy. As his voice rang out, footsteps could be heard all around the courtyard of the presidential palace. Please stay, Your Majesty. Cool breeze and drifting cloud appeared in the east. Please stay, Your Majesty. Li Zhonghu and Sun Mengran appeared in the west. Please stay, Your Majesty. Hua Qingfeng, the sect leader of the Shadow Sect, appeared in the south. Please stay, Your Majesty. Li Wangxing, the Lieutenant General of 9 regions, appeared in the north. More and more people appeared in different positions. Dozens of people, hundreds of people, were densely packed. Everyone completely surrounded the courtyard, including Wang Tianzong. Please stay, Your Majesty. This was everyone's voice. Wang Tianzong frowned tightly. The explosions kept ringing in the distance. The huge roar was like the thunder that swept through the whole city. Tonight, Reki City was in turmoil again. Wang Tianzong looked in the direction of the Caesar Hotel. He saw the shells whistling in the night sky. He saw the fighter planes hovering in the night sky. The smell of gunpowder seemed to have spread over, and the aura of killing and death was looming. Wang Tianzong slowly turned around and looked at Li Tianlan. His eyes were calm. But his calm coat seemed to be gradually falling off. In this state, Wang Tianzong seemed to have completely turned into a sword, with shocking sharpness. Li Tianlan looked into Wang Tianzong's eyes. His eyes were calm too. He was calm all over. Calm, tranquil, and far away. You won't let me go? Wang Tianzong asked. The Caesar Hotel was less than a few kilometers away from him. In the Caesar Hotel, his most important ally was being attacked and even slaughtered. He attacked a superpower with absolute military force. What was more fatal was that all the people of the Shadow Throne were still gathered together. Wang Tianzong didn't even dare to imagine the ending of the Shadow Throne tonight. Please stay, Your Majesty. Li Tianlan said softly. Chen Qinghuan's body fell at his feet, and the blood was still flowing. He seemed to have completely calmed down, and there was no longer any aggressiveness. If your majesty is willing to do me the honor, how about I invite your majesty to have a cup of tea? Who is in the Caesar Hotel? Wang Tianzong suddenly asked. As soon as he asked this question, he thought of the scene in front of the door. Qin Shilai? Only Prime Minister Riker could command the army. Riker was Li Tianlan's man. Everything in the Caesar Hotel must be Li Tianlan's doing. This was something that Li Tianlan himself admitted. Qin Shilai had just gone out. At this time, he should be close to the Caesar Hotel. There was no doubt that this dark sword master, who had the strength to enter the divine list, would be the most important force to contain King Tong. I don't know. Li Tianlan said softly, I only know that Reki City is not peaceful tonight, so I have given an order in advance. No one, including myself, is allowed to enter tonight and not leave. It's not against your majesty, but I need to be responsible for Zhongzhou State. Wang Tianzong sneered, and his voice suddenly became stern. The Shadow Throne is Zhongzhou State's partner. Li Tianlan, are you killing Zhongzhou State's ally now? Zhongzhou State's partner? Li Tianlan's voice became cold. Your Majesty, you seem to have forgotten your position. Ask yourself, do you stand here on behalf of Beihai or Zhongzhou State? What does it mean for me to stand here? Between you and me, who can better represent Zhongzhou State? He suddenly turned around, walked to his bedroom and said coldly, Ally? I've been in Eastern Europe for a few days, but I've never seen the so-called cooperation agreement between Zhongzhou State and the Shadow Throne. Where did the ally come from? Is the Shadow Throne an ally of Zhongzhou State or of you, Wang Tianzong? Have you already formed an alliance with the Shadow Throne on behalf of Zhongzhou State? Your Majesty, do you really have this qualification? Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan's back as he left. At this moment, his expression was still calm, but his heart was already surging wildly. He finally found that he had done something wrong. Li Tianlan was very young. His realm was very low. His combat capability was ordinary. Wang Tianzong called him Marshal Li, but deep down in his heart he had never thought much of Li Tianlan. Eastern Europe was in chaos. He forced Li Tianlan to come to Eastern Europe. Then he killed him. Everything was over. That was what Wang Tianzong thought from beginning to end. But at this moment, he realized how subtle Li Tianlan's identity as a marshal was. He stood on the side of the general trend. He was a marshal. No matter how young he was, at least in Eastern Europe, he was qualified to be his opponent. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you? Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows gradually. Li Tianlan paused and turned to look at Wang Tianzong. I don't believe it, he said. At this moment, Wang Tianzong really felt his anger. He looked at Li Tianlan and then around. The entire office of the president had been under martial law. In the current situation, it was not Li Tianlan who asked him to stay. It was the entire Snowdance Corps who asked him to stay. If Wang Tianzong broke in, the entire Snowdance Corps would fight to keep him here. Wang Tianzong thought that he could go out. But if things got to that point, how could the Wang family of Beihai live in Zhongzhou State? This was the general trend. Li Tianlan stood in the general trend and suppressed people with his power. Even though Wang Tianzong was the Sword Emperor, he had to weigh it. He couldn't kill Li Tianlan for the Shadow Throne. Nor could he break out of the encirclement and fight against the Snowdance Corps for the Shadow Throne. This was the most basic principle and bottom line. If Wang Tianzong moved, he would commit treason tonight. Is this considered luring the tiger away from the mountain? Wang Tianzong suddenly asked. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said nothing. But are you sure you can succeed tonight? There was a flash of mockery in Wang Tianzong's eyes. He was here, which meant that Li Tianlan temporarily imprisoned him here with the general trend. But it didn't mean that he couldn't do anything else. Wang Tianzong took out a very small instrument from his arms and pressed the button. The colorful lights on the button kept flashing. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at the instrument in Wang Tianzong's hand. Wang Tianzong directly threw the instrument in his hand over and said flatly, "Have you ever seen this thing?" Li Tianlan reached out to take it and looked down at the instrument in front of him. The instrument barrel was dark and there was a devil's head painted on it. Li Tianlan had never seen such a thing. but he knew that it was definitely one of Wang Tianzong's backup plans. He casually threw the instrument to Wang Tianzong, then took out a medal from his arms and threw it to Wang Tianzong. "Have you ever seen this thing?" Li Tianlan calmly asked the same question as Wang Tianzong. Chapter 484. Wang Tianzong looked down at the medal in his hand. Their positions were the same in the general direction. Wang Tianzong couldn't attack Li Tianlan blatantly. Li Tianlan also didn't dare to do anything to Wang Tianzong. To some extent, the confrontation between the two hovered at the bottom line of the crime of treason. Between advancing and retreating, it was either the sea and the sky or the cliff. Their positions invisibly smoothed out the huge gap between Wang Tianzong and Li Tianlan's strength. So in everyone's eyes, when the two really began to fight, it was also the time to show their trump cards one by one. The instrument he threw to Li Tianlan was his trump card. And the medal Li Tianlan threw to him was also Li Tianlan's trump card. The medal was extremely delicate and small, pure black, but there was a faint white line running through the whole black in the middle. Wang Tianzong looked at the medal and was silent for a long time. He knew that Li Tianlan would not see the instrument in his hand. But he had seen Li Tianlan's medal. This was the medal that Li Tianlan wore on his chest in the final battle of Heaven Capital. This medal symbolized an identity that could not be ignored in Zhongzhou State. Young governor of Sai City. Wang Tianzong frowned and glanced at Li Tianlan. In the almost frozen atmosphere, he suddenly said, "Not enough. How do you know if you don't try?" Li Tianlan stood where he was and looked at Wang Tianzong with unyielding eyes. The roaring explosion outside crossed a distance of several kilometers, as if it were close to his ears. Wang Tianzong thought silently for a while. He really miscalculated tonight, but he didn't lose in strategy. No one could have imagined that Li Tianlan's injury would recover so quickly. In other words, from the moment Li Tianlan opened his eyes, it meant that Wang Tianzong lost. Because Qin Xinghuan could not give up the power of the Snowdance Corps. Wang Tianzong could not give up the Snowdance Corps either. So when he was invited by Qin Xinghuan to preside over the overall situation, many forces in the dark of Reki City took advantage of his absence to target the Shadow Throne. Li Tianlan made a trap with his own injury, and now he used the general trend to imprison him here. As for the result, Wang Tianzong was unwilling to think about it. If Li Tianlan had not been absolutely sure, he would never have acted so decisively tonight. So after tonight, the Shadow Throne might be destined to suffer heavy losses. And this might have been the result that Li Tianlan met King Tong for the first time on the day he was in a coma. Wang Tianzong looked around again. He was surrounded by all the experts that the Snowdance Corps could bring out. Outside the office of the president, the Snowdance Corps had begun to gather. The glaring white searchlights kept spinning in the air, and the sound of helicopters rang out in the night sky. All the weapons of the Snowdance Corps were ready for battle. As long as Li Tianlan gave the order, the entire office of the president would be razed to the ground in the shortest time. Such a battle array could not trap Wang Tianzong. If it were other countries, Wang Tianzong could break out of the encirclement by himself with his sword. In his current realm, he would not even be injured. But at this time, he was surrounded by the army of Zhongzhou State. And the foreign troops he wanted to kill the most were besieging the Shadow Throne. So Wang Tianzong could move, but he could not. He couldn't kill them, so he couldn't get out. This round was truly perfect, almost flawless. Wang Tianzong glanced at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan stood there quietly, calm and peaceful. But vaguely, Wang Tianzong saw something different in him. It was the flow of time. The sound was the track of growth, and it was the taste that gradually became dark. Wang Tianzong saw a lot of things which seemed to be familiar. He had seen this kind of taste on Li Kuangtu back then, and even on himself. Everyone who stood at the peak of the dark world had this kind of taste. It was the indifference and prudence, gloominess and coldness, awe-inspiring and majesty that had been honed in countless saber lights and sword shadows. This was the so-called fierce and ambitious person. For the first time, Wang Tianzong admitted from the bottom of his heart that Li Tianlan was terrible. The most important thing was that his growth rate in all aspects was so amazing, as if he was born to belong to the dark world. Wang Tianzong suddenly appreciated Li Tianlan. He appreciated him sincerely. This kind of appreciation was very sincere, and because of this sincerity, the killing intent behind this kind of appreciation seemed more naked. You want to kill me? Li Tianlan looked at Wang Tianzong and asked calmly. Do you really want to stop me? Wang Tianzong asked. This sentence, combined with Li Tianlan's previous question, carried an extremely naked sense of threat. Everyone's heart sank. At this time, it is the army of Wulan State that is fighting outside. Prime Minister Riker discussed it with me before. They have confirmed that some terrorists are hiding in the Caesar Hotel, so they went to encircle and suppress them. As friends of Wulan State, we can't interfere in the internal affairs of Wulan State. Li Tianlan said calmly, so I want to ask Your Majesty to stay in the office of the President for a few more days. Wang Tianzong couldn't help laughing. Li Tianlan's serious nonsense completely infuriated him. With his smile, the space around Wang Tianzong became distorted at a speed visible to the naked eye. The space was constantly twisted and broken, and a bit of thick darkness with sword intent continued to gather in front of him. Lights, night, wind and rain. Everything was completely absorbed by that bit of thick darkness. In the darkness that could not be seen, Li Tianlan stood there. His eyes were hazy as if they were filled with mist. A faint white mist surged on him. The mist was very weak, but it became the only light in the absolute darkness. Everyone began to gather in the direction of the mist. There was more and more mist, and it spread farther and farther. Wang Tianzong suddenly frowned. Everyone was completely wrapped in his dark sword intent, and he himself was also wrapped in the white mist. His vision was a blur. Everyone else's sight was full of darkness. The only thing they had in common was that neither of them could see anything. Li Tianlan's voice sounded through the mist, slow and clear. Please think twice, Your Majesty. Now the general trend of Xianxia State is in my hands. If Your Majesty draws your sword, have you really thought about the general trend of the Wang family of Beihai? Wang Tianzong did not respond, but the thick dark sword intent around him began to slowly retreat. The vast white mist also began to disappear. Lights, wind and rain, explosions, and the office of the president reappeared in everyone's perception. Wang Tianzong was still standing there. He looked at Li Tianlan and was silent for a long time. Dragon vein? He suddenly asked. Vaguely, he seemed to understand what Li Tianlan meant by saying that the general trend of Xianxia State was in his hands. Li Tianlan carried the dragon vein. He was equivalent to carrying the destiny of the entire Xianxia State. If he was strong, Xianxia State was strong. If Xianxia State was strong, he was strong. With a huge amount of fate blessing him, Li Tianlan, in this state, was completely unique in all aspects. You actually know how to use the dragon vein? Wang Tianzong asked again. Li Tianlan was silent. No one knew what the dragon vein was. Even if he carried the dragon vein, he did not know what it was. But it was certainly not a weapon. If it was not a weapon, how could it be used? Even Li Tianlan was puzzled by the appearance of the white mist. He could not give Wang Tianzong any explanation at all. Li Tianlan took a step forward, looked at Wang Tianzong and said, Your Majesty, please. He did not ask him to go out. Instead, he asked him to go in. Wang Tianzong restrained his sword intent, which completely proved that he had completely recovered his calmness. It also showed that Wang Tianzong had completely accepted the failure tonight. Even if the failure this time could be said to be extremely heavy. Tonight, Li Tianlan had taken enough advantage, so he did not care about his attitude. At this time, when talking to Wang Tianzong, he suddenly became very respectful. Wang Tianzong looked at him with a smile and suddenly said, Do you think you will win tonight? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. As I said, your trump card is not enough. Wang Tianzong said calmly. He threw the medal representing the identity of the young governor of Sai City to Li Tianlan again. Li Tianlan's face changed. He reached out his hand and silently put the medal on his chest. After a moment of silence, he said blandly, If it's not enough, I'll play another card. Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan and seemed to be observing the truth of his words. Li Tianlan's expression was flat, making it impossible to see through his emotions. Wang Tianzong sighed softly. At least in terms of hiding his emotions, Li Tianlan did not lose to some old foxes in the dark world. "Where is my room?" Wang Tianzong said calmly. When he said this, he seemed to feel his heart twitch. Thinking of the situation after tonight, a trace of killing intent flashed through his eyes again. "Your Majesty, if you don't mind, you can live next to me," Li Tianlan said slowly, as if he was not aware of Wang Tianzong's killing intent. He took the lead to turn around and lead the way. Wang Tianzong stood there for a while. The sword intent around him disappeared completely. The wind and rain all over the sky fell on him, and his body was soon completely soaked. The summer rain in Eastern Europe was cold. In the cold rain, Wang Tianzong seemed to have figured something out. His body completely relaxed, and he followed Li Tianlan calmly. The experts of the Snowdance Corps stayed in place and looked at each other for a while. Cool breeze and drifting cloud coughed and left the office of the president first. Imprisoning Wang Tianzong was the most important step in tonight's plan. But it was not the whole plan. Everything about the Snowdance Corps was the real key. When the experts of the Snowdance Corps left the office of the president, Li Tianlan, with a calm expression, also arranged a room for Wang Tianzong. The army of the Snowdance Corps was still gathering and paying close attention to every move of the office of the president. After confirming that Wang Tianzong could not leave, Li Tianlan took Dongqing Rushi back to his residence. Dongqing Rushi gently closed the door. Li Tianlan sat in the chair, poured himself a full cup of herbal tea, and drank it in one gulp. Dongqing Rushi clearly saw that Li Tianlan's face, which had been ruddy just now, suddenly became a little pale. As he drank the tea, his forehead was already covered with cold sweat. "I want to take a shower and change my clothes." Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said with a bitter smile. Only he knew that at this moment, the cold sweat on his back had completely soaked his military uniform. "What's wrong?" Dongqing Rushi came over and reached out to touch Li Tianlan's forehead. Li Tianlan reached out to hold her hand and shook his head. "It's okay. I'm just scared." Apex, that you're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.